Pirates, I can reject everything. 101-120. 101. The mysterious ship. It turned out to be a whale that ate the fruit of the ship. What's the matter? Has it finally appeared? Grass. Bassos stood up quickly, looked around, didn't see any shadows, and said, cursing, "This is a few kilometers away again, fuck." Poison Q sat up, smiled cruelly and said, "What mysterious ship? After being discovered, can't it exist for hundreds of years if it is directly poisoned? Let's see if he can resist my barrier." Chi Luo, carrying the ghost cry, said coldly. He said, "With the help of Baccarat, it will take so many days to find out, no wonder it has not been found." Hawkins was playing the cards and said in a low voice, "Since we have discovered it, no matter how fast it is, it can't compare to Agent Zhenglian's domineering," and said indifferently, "It was said by Fanyoka so mysteriously, wait a minute. I want to see what the hell is this ship. This time, your fate is already doomed. After all, the captain is really too strong." Fanyoka looked at the sea level in front of him and saw the black ship he had seen many years ago, and said indifferently. Inside the training room. "Come on, we finally found it." The Queen Sweetheart's beautiful eyes lit up, her perfectly fair face was full of surprises, she was so happy. Bei Bang took a breath, and said calmly as always, "I can finally reveal the true face, I will study Karina well later." Nodding his head, his beautiful eyes were bright, and his smile was sweet and cute. He said, "Everyone is very curious, it's ticklish, hee hee. When I heard you mention this before, I was very curious." Carmen looked at them, with a charming smile on her delicate and beautiful face. She said with a smile, "I didn't expect this to happen only a few days after I came here. It seems that I can also bring you good luck." Makino stroked her dark green hair, widened her eyes, and smiled gently. "All of this is thanks to Sister Baccarat. Without her, I wouldn't have come across such interesting things." Kaya focused her head, her eyebrows curved, showing a sweet and pure smile, and said, "Yes, going to sea is so fun, it's much better than staying at home. I used to be at home and read books every day, so boring. Now I can not only see the blue waves, but also hear the chirping of seagulls. There are many, many more. I really like it." At this time, Chris stopped cultivating, still so calm, and spit out 2 words, "Let's go." After so many days of getting along, Nuo Chigao already knows Chris's person, and he is not so afraid of him. If Chigao knows very well, Chris just doesn't like to talk, so he seems to be a little colder. But he's very good at answering questions, and it's not that hard to talk. "Chris, have you sensed it?" with a sense of domineering. Nuochi looked at Chris to the right, blinked her beautiful eyes, and asked curiously, "What's the situation with the ship?" The girls followed behind Chris and didn't say a word. They all looked at him with a look of anticipation on his pretty face. Chris has always spoken very little and never said nonsense, so he just said these 2 words lightly. Carmen shrugged. Shangjan said with a slight smile, "It doesn't matter, we found it anyway. It is destined to not escape." Meaty's curly brows, her pale blonde hair tucked up, and she said generously, "As long as Chris comes forward, there will be nothing to do with it. Uncertainty, at least that's what I think. Lord Chris is really strong, the most powerful person I have ever met." The back of the man in front of Kia's right, in her beautiful eyes, is full of admiration, and she is extremely obedient. Makino smiled, nodded and said, "So young, yet so powerful, it is indeed the first time that Van Oka habitually tapped a gun on the shoulder, and said with a blank face, "The rotten boat found that. Come on, we've already started to accelerate, wanting to run away. Don't worry, even if it runs to the horizon, it will not be able to escape the Long Lafayette," turning his cane and saying politely, "The captain said that, in this world, no one can compare with him in speed. Even the flash of General Polsolino couldn't match the captain's speed. After all, space shuttle, there is no concept of distance at all." Crow glanced at Fan Oka, pushed his glasses, and said rationally, "Your observation is much stronger than that of the police officer. So far, the reporter has not found anything unusual." Bashes laughed loudly and said aloud, "Can it be compared? They are sharpshooters. If their eyesight is not strong, it is not a joke. At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps, and Chris and the others walked over. Coincidentally, there was also a general report from the observation deck. That mysterious ship picks up speed, it must have spotted us. The bossos was the most forthright, looked up at the observation deck, shouted, and scolded, "Didn't see the captain coming, can't it be more eye-catching?" Was a full-hearted voice from the observation deck, and the solemn voice said, "Yes, yes, Captain Bossos, you said that it was the sweetheart queen who gave Bossos a blank look, and said angrily, 'Don't be so scary, okay? Look at the alarm. What are you scared of?' The key is still loud, and he is the loudest voice on the boat." Betty took a breath and said softly. Suddenly, Lynn said, "Chris didn't say anything," and disappeared directly in place. Karina shrugged her shoulders and said speechlessly, "Our captain is too assertive. Every time he doesn't explain anything, he thinks leave just leave." Perona danced in the air and said with a smile, "Isn't it cool? It feels mysterious, as if he has been wearing black clothes, saying, mysterious." Makino frowned and said with a smile, "This is the commonality of all powerhouses. They are different." Nami looks at the sea level in front of her and smiles innocently. "Yeah, that's why the Navy gave him a float, on the sea level in front of the black." Chris looked at the mysterious ship below. There was indeed no one. No one was controlling it. The amine ship was completely black. The bow looked like the head of a whale, and there were many sharp acid ships on it. Looks so weird and mysterious. It deserves the title of the mysterious ship. "Where are you going? Can you give me a ride to the whale that ate the fruit of the boat?" Chris suddenly appeared on the deck, wrapped his arms in front of him, looked down at the hull slightly, and said calmly. Extremely shocked. No one has ever been on this ship. This is really the first time. The whale was frightened, and without saying a word, rolled violently, the boat shook violently, and wanted to throw this man out. Immediately, turbulent waves surged up on the sea, and white water splashes continued to spread to the distance. You can see the strength of this ship, how powerful it is. Fanyauka in the distance saw this scene, with a rare expression of surprise on his serious face. All right, and said incredulously, "It really is a mysterious ship." Rolling around, he was full of power, like an angry beast. Bossos looked in front of him. The distance was too far to see anything. He quickly turned his head to look at Fanyauka, and quickly asked, "How about that ship?" Luo, carrying the demon sword and crying, said coldly, "Without a telescope, it is impossible to see the situation in front of you." "Really?" Lafitte turned his cane, and a very gentleman said, "The process is not important, what we want is the result." Gongzhang. The woman didn't speak, and looked at Fanyauka silently, waiting for him to give an answer. There was nothing they could do. As for this man, they really wanted to talk to him at all, so they might as well keep quiet. 102. Ocean fruit, the strongest fruit that controls the entire sea. The captain has appeared on that ship. Fanyauka habitually tapped a gun on his shoulder, and said expressionlessly, "But that boat, as if alive, was resisting the captain. It shook violently, as if a big fish was rolling in a tank." They wanted to use the captain out to hear what he said. Everyone looked forward. Although the distance was getting closer, they still couldn't see what was going on in front of them. Indistinctly, only a black shadow can be seen. Nothing else is special. "I will also get a telescope someday." Shibasa's is the most anxious, and he is so angry that he curses. Crow pushed his glasses, his eyes flashed with wisdom, and analyzed. Like life, it seems that he ate evil fruit. Lafitte put his hand in front of him, smiled gently. "No need to guess, he will know the answer later on the whale boat." Facing the tumbling of the strange ship, Chris stood quietly, as if rooted on the deck. "Let it bombard indiscriminately, I will stand still. Surrender to me." Chris's eyes narrowed, the overlord look was domineering, and a wave of ripples spread out with a bang. The hull was shattered, and traces appeared. The whale stopped and rolled, motionless. On the huge head, cold sweat dripped, and a terrified look appeared as if something terrible happened. 483 Suddenly, the boat shook up and down, as if nodding, and chose to surrender. For this result, Chris is not surprised. His arms are still in front of him, standing quietly, waiting for their arrival. Seeing this scene, Fan Yuenka nodded slightly, with a rare faint smile on his serious face. It's fate. This time, everyone didn't ask him, because the distance was getting closer, and you could see the situation above. Makino blinked her beautiful eyes, and her face was extremely beautiful, showing curiosity, and murmured, "This is the mysterious ship, how does it look like a whale?" Kia nodded. Okay, her pretty face was full of interest. She said with a smile, "What a strange ship, is indeed very mysterious. This should be a whale." Ju touched her delicate chin. She was slim, and she said gently, "If I guess correctly, it will turn into a ship after eating a devil fruit." Karina's beautiful eyes flowed, revealing a sly color, and said with a smile, "What kind of evil fruit?" Perona, a godlike Wanran, floated to Bakara's side, with a curious look on her face, and hurriedly asked, "Sister Kara, do you remember what evil fruit this is?" Queen Sweetheart also looked at Bakara, her eyebrows curved, and said, "Sister Bakara, you often read the Devil Fruits illustrated book, you must know it." Bakara folded her crimson hair, smiled and said, "If nothing else, it should be the Superman boat." Carmen looking at them, wrinkling her beautiful eyebrows, her pretty face full of doubts, and asking, "There is a question, aren't those with the power of evil fruits afraid of seawater? It will be cursed by the sea, it will not be able to appear in the sea at all, and it will be killed by the sea. Then this whale, oh, it is this ship, how can it sail on the sea? It feels very strange." Nuauchi nodded high, smiled slightly, and continued, "This question, I wanted to ask it just now, but I can't understand it at all." Nami saved the two of them, blinked her big eyes and smiled innocently. "What's so strange about this? It's normal. A person with similar abilities will definitely not be able to appear at sea, and will be completely powerless and unable to move. But this is the fruit of the boat, and the capable person becomes a boat. And if a boat can't sail on the sea, is it still called a boat? Ha ha ha." Needy stroked her pale blonde hair, smiled and said, "Nami is right, it makes sense." Hearing their conversation, Bosses suddenly had a whim and laughed. "Since there are ships and fruits, you can sailing on the sea, don't be afraid of the sea. Is there any ocean fruit? If there is, then you can control the entire sea and summon the ability of the sea at will." Bashas held up his double pipes and said with a loud laugh, "The most important thing is that once you eat the ocean fruit, all the capable ones BCF will be finished." Way ha 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 po q. S vicissitudes of life's face, a mysterious with a smile, such a fruit is impossible to exist, so stop dreaming. Crow habitually pushed his glasses, his eyes flashed with the light of wisdom, and said calmly and rationally, "The evil fruit of nature, logically speaking, exists. But this evil-footed fruit itself is against the sea. I personally think that it is impossible to appear in the world." Luo carrying a demon knife and crying, Gao Leng said, "The light, magma and other things in nature all appear. In history, I have never heard of ocean fruit, and it certainly does not exist." Lafitte looked at Baccarat, turned his cane, and asked politely, "Have you read the Devil Fruits manual? Have you mentioned the ocean fruit?" Baccarat folded her crimson hair and nodded lightly, gentle and pleasant. "No, this devil fruit is never mentioned in the picture book." Betty took a breath, still so indifferent, and said, "How can a devil fruit that has never appeared before be written into the illustrated book?" "But didn't Sister Baccarat say that ocean fruits exist?" "This is Sister Baccarat's intuition." And the Queen Sweetheart looked at the man in black and said with a smile, "Didn't Chris keep looking for ocean fruits? It's just that this fruit is too mysterious, and even big Sister Baccarat is helpless, unable to sense its existence." Ju blinked her beautiful eyes, graceful and gentle. "I will find it one day. I believe in Baccarat's ability." "No. There will be problems." Bashas laughed loudly and said, "There really are ocean fruits, this is too incredible. Jins looked at Luo, still dead, and said in a low voice, there are still ocean fruits, that's too scary. Looking forward to that day, I really want to see what the ocean fruit looks like. Fan Oka tapped his sore shoulder with a gun, and said seriously, I believe that what the captain wants to do will definitely be done, no need for that doubt. Crow frowned, shook his head and said, how can the devil fruit that has never appeared in history be so easy to find? The deep sea, and only in this way can we explain why no one has obtained Lafitte. No one can find it. Naturally it is impossible to get this devil fruit, but don't worry, Chang will definitely find it. At this time, the Chris had come to the side of the whale ship. After Padang shouted quickly, he jumped on the whale and jumped towards Chris. 103. It can become bigger or smaller, this is the strongest ship in the world. Whale boat. Captain, are you sure that the whale ate the fruit of the boat? Bassos looked at the black ship, laughed and asked the poisonous Q and coughed and said, aren't you talking nonsense? It is also necessary to ask Ah Jin to come to the bow of the boat and observe for a while. This boat should not be so ordinary, is there something special about it? Since I ate the fruit of the boat, if I guessed correctly, then I can definitely change the construction of the boat at will. Klo habitually pushed his glasses, and with the light of wisdom in his eyes, he calmly analyzed. Van Oka tapped his sore shoulder with a gun, and said with rare emotion, the mysterious ship that has been searching for hundreds of years has finally come to an end today. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him and smiled slightly, what other people can't do, we can only do it. Baiju, we are the strongest pirate group in the world. At this time, with a delicate chin, he smiled and said, I remember eating the Shaochuan fruit, you can indeed transform the ship at will. But this whale, can it understand what we say? Karina immediately became excited, her beautiful eyes flowed, and she said with a smile, whale boat, can you make it bigger? As soon as the voice fell, the deck suddenly expanded outwards, and the whole ship became a lot bigger and looked more powerful and domineering. This scene change, everyone was stunned. Was shocked. Amazing, really amazing. Kayali's eyes widened, her fair and delicate face showed a look of shock, and she muttered something. Makino nodded and said with emotion, on the sea, there are really too many strange things. Sure enough, going to sea for adventure is the most correct. Nuauchi smiled sweetly and agreed, this is really incredible, if you tell others, no one will believe it. Needy stroked her hair and said softly and dignifiedly, whales eat bad fruits, this is surprising enough. Now even the hull can be changed, which is really shocking. The Queen's sweetheart is right with them, her beautiful eyes are shining, and she looks very excited. It seems that we have to change boats again. This boat is undoubtedly the most suitable. It can be changed implicitly, and the sailing speed is also the fastest. Zizuji, in this world, there is a better sea hidden ship than this. There must be none. Betty took a breath and said lightly, on such a strange ship, we want to go to the Great Waterway, and the time can be shortened. Many days. Nami waved her little hand, her pretty face was full of excitement, and she said quickly, don't talk about these things, the other things are not important at all. Now, let's start remodeling this lead. I'm going to live in a big room. How Perona is flying around in the air, making a silver bell-like laughter, head to head, so does this princess. If you live in a big princess, you have to design it yourself. Haley hamming tilde. The women were very excited, and they quickly discussed how to design this room, and why not only the women were very inviting in that room, and even these big men were no exception. With this boat, we can definitely conquer the whole film the sea. Wei ha Bashes raised his arms high, very happy, and his voice was very loud. Poison Q's smile is still so ugly, if you encounter the pursuit of the Navy in the future, you can completely get rid of them and let them stare at the back, hey. Crow pushed his glasses with his palm, showing a rare swirling smile, and then said, this ship must be the best ship on the entire sea, there is no. It is enough to change at will, and the speed is the fastest, it is perfect, it is the world's #1. Luo hugged the ghost crying, nodded, very similar. Hawkins played the cards and said in a low voice, "The strength of the team has become stronger once again and has not yet entered the Great Waterway. All external conditions have been completed before reaching the Kingdom of Alabasta and becoming the Chihuahai." On the side, Ajin cultivated his domineering aura and said indifferently, "With the speed of this ship, before the battle for the squad leader, we have already become Chihuahai." Lafitte adjusted his top hat, smiled, and said gently that the team was not perfect, and it was time for a big fight. "Let the whole sea spread our name." At this moment, Chris waved his hand and said with a high momentum, "Little ones, bring all the things here, we are going to have a banquet." Everyone has not recovered. Since going to sea, there has never been a banquet. This is the first time. It was enough for people to react. After he came back to his senses, a shocking roar broke out on the boat. "Great, the captain finally had a banquet, ha ha ha. From going out to sea till now, I am the happiest today, quack tilde hurry up, don't say anything, I'm taking things for me, hurry up. I'm so excited, I'm so happy, I really want to hit Renming. Twist, hurry up, twist with Lao Su, la la la, don't push me." The crew below, one by one, elated, Padang kicked his stilts, puffed up, and said with a smile, "Have a banquet, I like to have a banquet the most." Dada Habiba looked at Padang with a big smile, "I also like to have a banquet. The banquet, the food cooked by Sister Carmen is really good. The captain even said that there is going to be a banquet. This special mother is unprecedented." Wei ha 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 Bashes laughed and was very excited. Poison Q coughed and said, "I suspect that the captain has a mental problem. This is definitely not our Captain Luo." Looking at Hawkins, who is still so cold. "The captain is in a good mood today. It is indeed too rare to ask for flowers. The matter in the East China Sea has been completed, and the next step is to enter the Great Waterway." Hawkins said in a lifeless voice. So, the captain planned to hold a banquet, which is actually understandable. Sanjianjin stopped practicing. The captain is such a person who cherishes time, also will make such a plan. It can be seen how much attention will be paid to this game. This time there is a banquet, and I want to wait until the next time. Only when I become Chihuahai will I have a chance. Crow is as calm and rational as always, and his tone is very positive. Lafitte smiled slightly, with a rare expression of excitement on his fair face, and said something. "The captain is planning to hold a banquet, which really made me very excited. I mentioned it to the captain before, but the captain has no time and no interest to hold a banquet now. What a rare opportunity." Hearing Chris's words, the girls stopped discussing, looked at each other, and laughed one by one. Queen Sweetheart's pretty face was full of excitement, and she smiled sweetly and said, "Great, after waiting for so long, it's finally time for a banquet." Betty took a puff of cigarette, and the army was shocked. "It's really not easy. My mother thought that she would not hold a banquet until she became Chihuahai." Nami looked at the Mei gang, her eyes widened, and she said with a smile, "Sister Meidi, remember to mix the wine you like the most. Sister Carmen, I want to eat that mushroom stew. It is the best soup I have ever had." Koya looked at Carmen, her eyebrows curved, and her smile was sweet and pure. She was very cute. Carmen put her arms around her and smiled. Said, "It's a small matter, it's rare to have a banquet, I'll do my best." Meidi nodded and said with a smile, "Well, since this is the first time to hold a banquet, I will take it seriously and rest assured. I will prepare a lot of fine wine later, everyone can drink it openly, and make sure you have enough." Karina couldn't help but clapped her hands and said with a smile, "There is food and wine, and I got such a treasure ship again. Today is really worth celebrating. Banquets are the best." Hee Luo Fang flew around in the air, and the laughter never stopped. Haley. Makino looked at Meidi, and said very gently, "I have worked in a tavern for many years, and I will give you a hand and look at Baccarat." Both of them are very happy to have sailed for so long, and it is time to relax. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, smiled and said, "Chris has been practicing hard, I'm afraid he's exhausted." Ju nodded lightly, Ying Ying smiled, it's not just him who needs to relax, everyone is the same. I'm really looking forward to the banquet. 104. Chris, Violet, want to be your woman. Evening. At this time, in the western sky, the sunset is about to go down, and the clouds are dyed red, which looks beautiful. The new Chris, on the deck. The tables and chairs are all set up, and the table is full of delicious food and wine. Everyone has arrived, sitting on the chairs, waiting for the start of the banquet. Chris is in the middle position, standing up quickly, shouting, "Little guys, not much nonsense I said, eat with an open stomach tonight, drink hard, if you don't get drunk or go back." There is a warm applause around you, and there is a thunderous shout at the same time. "Captain, I love you so much, ha ha ha. Long live Captain Chris. I'm so excited, I'm about to cry," humming. Hurry up, don't talk nonsense, give it to Lao Su, and when you're done, you have to fight for wine." 853 in our village, who doesn't know Lao Su's prestige? People in the rivers and lakes have nicknamed Lao Su 1,000 cups are not drunk in the ferry. "Guys, this guy is too aggressive, fuck him." The scene was particularly lively, with cheers, laughter, and kisses all over the Amin boat. Pa Dong looked at Babo and said with a smile, "Come on, let's drink, we won't go home if we don't get drunk today." Beppo shook his head again and again, refusing. "Okay, I don't know how to drink alcohol, please forgive me, Padong. Captain, we have known each other for so long, we are still the first. Would you like to compare the amount of alcohol, way ha ha ha." Bassos patted the table, laughed loudly, and was invited to fight the drug queue and ate delicious food. The Joker was still so ugly, he coughed and said, "The captain's drunken attitude must be particularly ugly, hey." Luo was as cold as always, and said unceremoniously, "You think too much, such a thing is impossible to happen. After all, the captain has eaten the fruit of rejection, alcohol, just reject it directly, drink and drink hawking." C nodded and said in a low tone, "So, when it comes to drinking, no one is the captain's opponent." Akin stood up, held a glass of wine, and faced Chris, and said respectfully, "Captain, only let's go. La fight." Tay waved his hand and smiled slightly, "If you want to drink, then come together, what's the point of two people drinking? Come on, let's go together, how are you doing?" Crow raised his wine glass and looked at everyone with a rare smile on his face. "Just feel free to drink." Chris raised his glass, and without saying a word, he raised his head to drink. Then, everyone opened up to drink and chat, and the atmosphere was very lively. Chris lit a cigarette, leaned back in his chair, looked up at the night sky, and silently smoked. Lei Ju looked at Baccarat, her beautiful eyes were shining, and she had a sweet and charming smile on her pretty face. She said softly that everyone was happy, including Chris. Of course. Baccarat picked up the wine glass, took a sip, and smiled, "The stronger the team is, the better it will be." How could Chris be unhappy? No reason. At this time, Jung Mei looked at Karina, laughed and said, "Well, can you still hold me? You can't drink me." Karina smiled disdainfully and snorted, "Women must survive by wisdom, but the amount of alcohol should not be too bad. No matter how good you are, this princess is the least able to drink," humming. Perona sat on the chair and looked at the two of them. Her little face was full of depression, she was very troubled. Kia turned to her right, she blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a pure and elegant smile, "It's okay, I wouldn't happen to have me with you, too, would it be nice?" Sweetheart Queen smiled sweetly and said to Betty, "Happy, I haven't been so happy for a long time." We also walked Beibang and gave her a sideways glance and sneered, "You want to fight with the old lady, stop joking, drink." Needy was eating, looked at Carmen, smiled sweetly and praised, "The food you cook is really delicious and admirable, it's really amazing." Carmen leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, took a sip of wine, and praised him in turn, "You are amazing, the wine you prepared is really delicious." Makino looked at the two of them, blinked her beautiful eyes, she was gentle and generous, "You two should stop complimenting each other. In my opinion, you are both very good. One can cook food, and the other can mix fine wine. At this moment, Bashes roared loudly and said loudly with a smile, drink, do tay mother hides, don't sit silly one by one, way ha 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 ha. Do it, drink it, don't get drunk. As the banquet continued, everyone was in high spirits, drinking heavily, chatting, and couldn't stop at Dayton's Rosa, in a hidden room. A woman stood at the closed mouth. She was wearing a flamenco dance costume. She was very slender and looked solid. It's too much to give away. Once this call is made, there is no turning back, alas. Violet looked up at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window, and her flawless face was full of worry. She went through various ways and went through a lot of searching, and finally got Chris's contact information. But now it makes her a little confused. She doesn't know if she should say what she said to King Liku and Shueibika before making this phone call. That is to deceive them about what they want. How could Violet be handed over to the dead man to deal with? Definitely make the call in person, but if the call goes out and Chris tells Doflamingo about it, she'll be completely screwed. No, after my investigation, I learned that there are so many women around Chris, and he is very fond of them. He must be a man who loves beauty and loves beautiful women. He wants him to agree to my request and save Dress Rosa, then be his woman, I would too. Violet's eyes were firm, and he said secretly, what kind of love is 4.0, it's all fake and unreliable. Men like to lie, and they all want to possess a woman's body. He will definitely see me and help me. It doesn't matter how my life is going, even if I get beaten up by him every day, I will recognize it. The most important thing is to make the father and king happy and let the people live a happy life. So settle down, call him, and be sure to ask him to help me no matter what. Even if you give everything, you will not hesitate. Without any further hesitation, the phone bug came out, so I dialed it out. 105. Hi Chris, my name is Violet. Chris, inside the training room. I'm so happy, it feels really great to have a party. Karina looked at them with bright eyes, and said with a smile, I really want to hold banquets often, everyone is happy, how wonderful. Corona floated in the air, nodded again and again, with a clear laugh, yes, yes, this princess also likes to hold banquets and super likes it. Holly holly charming tilde tilde you think too much, how is this possible? Queen Sweetheart gave them both a white look and said angrily, if you don't say that you often hold banquets, there is nothing new at all. Most importantly, what kind of person is Chris, and how could he waste time on such a meaningless banquet? Betty took a breath, calm as always, even if we enter the Great Channel, there will be no more banquets. If you want to have a next time, you have to wait until you defeat Crocodile and become Shichibukai, and then it is possible for Meaty to stroke her pale blonde hair, and a sweet smile on her white and beautiful face, agreeing, I'll be content if I can have such a banquet once. For Chris, a training robot, it is very, very rare to be able to free up once. As for the next time, I can't even think about it. Makino nodded, her eyebrows were curved, and she looked very gentle. A man should be like 547. He has a sense of struggle and strives to become stronger. If you get old and drink, it will be very inappropriate. Makiju looked at them, smiled and said, there are many people in the tavern I run who don't do anything other than drink every day. Goal. Carmen shrugged his shoulders and directly retorted, I'm not against cultivation, but it's a bit too much to work as hard as Chris. Nami waved her hand, Chen narrowed her eyes, her smile was pure and sweet, and Daming said, don't worry, everyone. In a few days, we can reach the town of Rog, and then enter the Great Channel, and soon we can reach the kingdom of Alabasta. Anyway, before the battle for the squad leader, Nuauchi, who will definitely become Chiwahai, poked her blue hair and said with a slight smile, Roger, I remember the town called, the beginning and the end. Not only is he famous in the East China Sea, but even in the whole world, he is well known, and he is concerned by the world. Ju is lingering on Erlang's legs. With his delicate chin in his jade hand, he nodded lightly and agreed. Rog Town is indeed very famous. After all, it is the birthplace and execution place of One Piece. All pirates must know the existence of this city. Steel BCFI. There is no doubt that Nami smiled and said, if we set out from the East China Sea, if we want to enter the Great Waterway, we must pass through Rog Town, which is unavoidable. After the town of Suge, let's have a good time. What is the difference there? At this moment, a crisp voice rang out in the training room. In the drawer in front of Baccara, the phone bug chirped. All the girls were stunned for a while, and they all had to look suspicious because the phone bug in charge of Baccara never rang. This was the first time. Strange, who is calling? Queen Sweetheart looked at the drawer in front of Baccara, wrinkled Shuden, and said in confusion, I thought this phone bug was invalid, but I didn't expect it to ring. Incredible, who could this be? Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth, still so indifferent. What are you thinking about? Don't you know when you pick it up? Baccara slowly opened the drawer, put a purple phone bug inside, gently placed it on the table without hesitation, directly lifted the receiver, and answered the phone bug to lure Chris. The phone bug simulates the appearance of Violet, with black and beautiful hair, and the beautiful face can be seen from the woman opposite. Her appearance must be very beautiful. The girls froze for a moment. It turned out to be a woman. And she's a big beauty. Who is this person? Have you never seen him before? Karina looked at them, wrinkling her beautiful Luyi brows. Her pretty eyelids were full of doubts. Perona Lice was in the air, shook her little head, and said directly, I haven't seen it before, I don't know who it is. Baccara folded her crimson hair, her eyebrows curved, and she asked with a smile, may I ask who you are? The other side was silent for a while, and did not answer immediately. Violet really didn't expect that this would happen. According to the normal situation, he called Chris, and it turned out that a woman appeared. But it doesn't matter, Violet will not be affected, she said with a smile, my name is Violet, I have something to discuss with Chris. Please give him the phone bug, I want to talk to him alone, thank you. Queen Sweetheart looked at Betty, smiled slightly, and whispered, this woman seems to be very polite, I feel that her temperament must be very good. Bang shrugged his shoulders, took a puff of cigarette, and said lightly, this ghost knows, anyway, when my mother is not at this time. Baccara smiled and said gently and generously, okay, please wait a moment, I will help you ask about this Violet. Baccara feels that she is very polite and has a very good impression of her, thank you. Violet blinked her beautiful eyes, and her smile was sweet and pleasant. It was very good looking. Baccara looked at the busy man in front and said with a sweet smile, Chris, someone called her. Her name is Violet, and she wants to be alone. Discuss things with you. Chris was doing a handstand with one hand, and he didn't stop. His voice was as calm as ever, and he said, let her say directly that Chris would answer like this. The girls are not surprised, but they think it's normal. After all, this guy, for other things, I don't care at all unless it's a major event, otherwise I don't want to fight against him in cultivation. Our captain is still so cold. Makino looked at the girls, stroked her dark green hair, smiled softly and elegantly. Very Lady Kia nodded lightly, smiled sweetly and said, Chris is too hard, he can't stop for a minute. Carmen leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and showed a helpless look on his face, saying that I have nothing to say. No wonder, I have long been used to it. Reese's indifference, his character, is so peculiar. At this time, Baccara looked at the phone bug and smiled gently. Chris said it, let you say it directly, he is listening by the side. She knows best about Chris' situation. The really important phone bugs are all in the hands of Chris, and will not be handed over to her. For example, the phone bugs contacted by Dao Free, including Hancock's, and the phone bugs in her hands are fundamentally important. It's not big. Chris didn't take it too seriously and fell silent again. The phone bug's eyes blinked, imitating Violet's thinking, which was very vivid. Saying such important things in front of outsiders. How does this allow Violet to accept? Please tell Chris that my business here is very serious. I would like to be able to talk to him alone. Please help me tell him, thank you. 106. Chris, how can you be so indifferent? Violet is going to cry. Hearing Violet and repeating the words just now, the girls couldn't help but glance at each other, and one shook his head slightly. They can understand that this Violet doesn't understand Chris's person and character at all. She feels too good about herself. Karina shrugged her shoulders, her beautiful eyes flowed, revealing a sly look. She said with a smile, if this is a call from Chris, I will definitely hang up. Perona floated in the air, nodded her head, and said affirmatively, then it's needless to say that our captain has always been the same. Let her say it directly, then you have to say it immediately. The sweetheart queen who can't wait for a second is stroked. Thumbelina has pale blonde hair. Maymay looked at the man in front, and smiled bitterly. Chris spoke, never saying it a second time. Gangang is arbitrary, and no one wants to change him. Even so strong, Betty took a cigarette, as always. Calmly said, the strong are like this, when they speak, the listener must pay enough attention, that's all. Carmen shook his head, with a helpless look on his pretty face. He sighed, it's not good to be too strong, it will appear cold-blooded and ruthless. Najiu looked at Baccarat, her hands resting on her white chin. She smiled gently and said, there's no need to ask Chris about this kind of thing. His answer must be to hang up the phone. There is no other possibility. Baccarat smiled at Kuju and nodded in agreement. Among these people, she was the first to follow Chris. To say who knows this man best, it must be her. In Baccarat's view, Chris is the most powerful and domineering man in the world, and there is no Violet. Well, I will say it straight. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, curled her eyebrows, and showed a dignified and elegant look on her pretty eyelids, said with a slight smile, you don't know Chris as a person. What he said has never been repeated, and the second truth is that you think things are very important. You need to chat with him alone, and no outsiders can listen in, but this is only your personal opinion. It is you who think too much it's important, that's all. Baccarat glanced at the man in front of him, and said with a smile, Chris has a special phone bug, and those are the ones he focuses on. As for me here, all I receive is a whole small matter, all of which are irrelevant. Do you see what I mean now? No matter how important your business is, in Chris's eyes, it's not a big deal. Baccarat shook his head lightly, and Luo Qian said generously, so, if you have something, just say it directly. Chris won't answer your call, although it sounds ugly, but Violet, this is the truth, you have the right way. The other side fell silent again, her beautiful eyebrows frowned, and she looked extremely bitter. Violet never thought that Chris would be such a person, so cold-blooded and ruthless. He said it himself, there are very important things to discuss, but he doesn't care that Violet feels hurt. He was full of blood and worked hard to call for help, but in exchange, he was treated so coldly. She was so aggrieved, she was about to cry. Finally, with a sigh, she resigned. After all, I am asking Chris for help, and people show their faces and respond indifferently. That is Chris right, so I will say it directly. Violet cheered up, threw all negative emotions into the sea, and began to tell in detail with a serious look on her pretty face. I am the princess of Dressrosa. I was a cadre under Doflamingo. My country was taken over by Doflamingo, this bastard. On the beautiful and delicate adventure, Yan showed indignation and said, my mother, as well as many relatives in the family, were brutally killed. In order to get revenge, I joined the Don Quixote family and acted as an undercover agent to inquire about their news. Some time ago, Doflamingo met Lord Chris, and the two fought a battle, but Lord Chris won. Violet blinked her beautiful eyes and said with emotion, when I heard Brother Doflamingo mention this, I was shocked. It's incredible. In an instant, in my mind, I thought of a way. That is to contact Lord Chris, ask him to help me, solve Doflamingo Violet for me, pause for a while, stroke the black hair in front of his forehead, his beautiful eyes are lowered, and he is very embarrassed to say, if Lord Chris is willing to help me, I can be his woman, give everything for him, and listen to him in everything. Lord Chris, please help me, save my country, Dressrosa please. After the exchange, he bowed deeply, and his attitude was extremely sincere. After listening to her, he was very moved to hear her such a sincere tone, an extremely tragic experience, and the girls fell silent one by one and felt pity for her. Fei Chong sympathizes with her. Kia is the most innocent and pure. Looking at Makino, her beautiful eyes were full of hurt, and she said in a low voice, Sister Violet is too difficult. Her family was brutally killed, and she still has to do things under the enemy's hands. Alas, Sister Violet must be very painful and very sad in her heart. Makino gently touched Kia's small bag. She was very happy. Han had already regarded her as his own sister, shook his head gently, sighed, and said in awe, everyone has their own, it's impossible to live so happily. Let's not say more, let Chris make his own decision. Karina frowned, looked at Perona, and asked, isn't Brother Doflamming our partner? Perona nodded her head. It was also very puzzling. I didn't understand. How could she let Chris deal with her partner? Nuao Chigao looked at Nami and said with a complicated expression, she is just like us. Her relatives were killed horribly, and she had to do things for the enemy. Ming, it's so similar. Nami sighed, and couldn't help recalling the various experiences in the past. Extremely sad. My mother was killed by the dragon and I can't do anything, instead I work under his hands. It's so similar, we and Violet are so miserable. The Queen's sweetheart looked at Chris and saw that he was still cultivating, as if she hadn't heard Violet's request that she wanted to be Chris's woman. This condition was really not attractive at all. The Queen's sweetheart turned her head and looked at Betty. With a wry smile, no need to say, Chris will definitely not help for this. Bei Bang took a breath, still calm, and said with certainty, our plan has long been made to become Chihuahai, and then start the Chihuahai Alliance to share resources and information. So, Chris can't do it for this. A woman, Baccarat, who changed her decision, is very clear about Chris's attitude towards women. Seeing that he is still cultivating, and saying nothing, this is the best answer. Because he was really not interested, he didn't even bother to talk. Chris, my gut tells me that her country has what we want. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, her beautiful eyes were folded on Chris. She smiled and said, although I don't know what it is, I feel that it is very important to us and indispensable. Baccarat's words made everyone stunned. Violette stood in front of the window, her beautiful eyes were full of doubts, and she had no idea what the woman on the other side was talking about. What is your country? Could it be that Chris wants to take this country and occupy this place? Sister Baccarat or Zhao feels good luck again. What will it be this time? I'm looking forward to it. Perona floated to Baccarat's side, her beautiful eyes were shining, and her pretty face was full of interest. Karina thought about it, and said in a very sure tone, it can make Sister Baccarat have such a deep intuition. This thing is not the same, it is very precious. Carmen shrugged and said casually, treasure is definitely impossible. That's what's left, weapons and evil fruits. But I don't think it should be. These things are not so important to us. Skuya looked at Makino, with a pure and elegant face, with a look of admiration, and murmured, Sister Baccarat's ability, really it's amazing. Makino nodded lightly, with a very gentle tone, yes, she is the goddess of luck on our ship. At this time, Chris stopped practicing and began to think seriously. After all, this matter is really too important, it affects the overall plan, so he has to pay attention to it. 107. In 2 years, I will kill Doflamingo. Chris lit a cigarette and stood quietly in front of him, looking out at the blue sea. In his plan, Doflamingo has always been a heavyweight player who can play a huge role. The guy is cold by nature, has the idea of destroying the world, hates the Navy, and is very disgusted with the Tianlong people. As a Tianlong person, he was deprived of his identity. This has completely distorted his psychology, and he is simply a mad dog who can only bite. Such a good chess piece, it would be a pity if he was not used rationally. They all know that Chris has a problem. Our captain is the most decisive. He is not sloppy when he speaks and does things, and rarely sees his contemplative appearance. Karina shrugged her shoulders, smiled and said something. Needy stroked her hair, smiled and said, "No way, if we promise to help Violet, then our plans will all be affected. This is called pulling 1, 5, 3, 1 hair and moving the whole body. I have to be cautious." Some sweetheart queen nodded, with a serious look on her pretty face. Chris has already made a plan for the hegemony, and it will definitely not be changed easily. So in the face of Sister Baccarat's suggestion, you must think about it and think about the various issues that follow. Betty took a breath and said lightly, "Let's leave this kind of thing and let Chris decide for himself." Ju touched her white chin and asked Baccarat, "What do you think it could be?" Baccarat shook her head slightly, "Come on her beautiful eyebrows, I can't tell what it is, but it feels important to Chris. There is an intuition, if Chris does not agree, this thing is impossible to obtain. Violet on the opposite side also knows that things are very important. Chris must be thinking seriously, so he will not speak, just wait quietly, beautiful and exquisite with a ditched look on his face. He must agree, Chris. If he doesn't agree, then Dressrosa will really be over. No one will come to save the country. Violet knows this very well." At this moment, Chris exhaled a cigarette and turned to look at Barbara. "Carla," said calmly, "tell her to solve Doflamingo within 2 years. However, what I need must be given to me immediately." After flicking off the cigarette butts, he continued to practice. Hearing Chris say this, the girls are not surprised, but feel very normal. This is an intuition from Baccarat. You must choose to believe Violet. You heard what Chris said. Baccarat raised her eyebrows and said with a sweet smile, "If you didn't hear it clearly, I can repeat it." The other side didn't answer immediately. She frowned her beautiful eyebrows, and thought about it. 2 years is no problem, my country is totally waiting. After a while, Violet made a sound, with a wry smile on her beautiful and delicate face, and she was intimidated. "You don't know, Dressrosa has long been occupied by Doflamingo. Treasures, weapons, all in his hands." "I really don't know what all the things you said," Violet sighed and said distressedly. "Even if I want to give it to you, there is no way to start." Hearing her say that, the girls are very puzzled. Olette, she shouldn't be joking, she really doesn't know what Chris wants, and Dressrosa, there shouldn't be any valuable treasures, but if she doesn't know, then things will be tricky. Because Chris has already said that Apple will only help when something comes up. This is the premise. Like this. Baccarat pulled out her crimson hair, frowned, pondered for a moment, and then slowly said, "If you don't know, it doesn't matter. Who are the close people around you? I feel that this thing is in this circle." Baccarat blinked her beautiful eyes, smiled and said, "You don't have to worry, if you ask, you will know what the thing is this time." The other side couldn't bear it any longer. The pretty eyelids were full of curiosity, and he directly asked that, "Why do you know so clearly?" Violet frowned and said suspiciously, "You said just now that my country has something that Lord Chris needs. It's even more certain now that things are right beside me, which is really incredible. Can you tell me how you know?" Baccarat leaned on the chair, with Erlang's legs crossed, dignified and noble, and said with a smile, "My name is Baccarat, I am a lucky fruit person. I can feel the arrival of good luck, and my intuition is accurate. Violet, that's why I know it." The sweet queen stroked her hair, smiled and said, "It's not very accurate, it's 100% right." Betty took a breath and added, "That's true, never had a problem." What? Shock. Violet was recruited by the shock. Although she investigated Chris, she didn't find Baccarat's ability at all. It was incredible that she didn't know she was so fierce. No wonder, so it is. Violet shook her head, her beautiful and elegant face was full of complex colors, and she felt the fruit of luck. With you by Mr. Chris's side, everything he does will be smooth sailing, no Baccarat. You are really amazing, luck can't be seen or touched, but you have mastered such a miraculous ability. I admire you so much. Baccarat shook his head slightly, with a gentle and pleasant smile, and said generously, I admire you, you are so beautiful, and you are the princess of Dressrosa. How big is this person? She is a noble and beautiful woman, the person I should be envious of is me. Viat, I feel that you are very talkative, and I have a very good impression of you. We will always keep in touch with you in the future. She has been paying attention to the beauties around her, and she can't miss any of them. As long as they appear, they belong to Chris. Dressrosa's Princess Ming, who has such a high status and is a woman of Chris, is the best. Including the last time I invited Ching Makino and Kia to board the ship, it was also Baccarat's personal idea. In the future it will definitely happen again. Well, I like you very much too, we will chat often in the future. Violet has beautiful eyes, stroked the black hair in front of his forehead, smiled gracefully and said, well, I'll hang up first. Go and ask my father. I'll call you again when it's confirmed later, is it alright, Sister Baccarat? Baccarat nodded and smiled slightly. Okay, you can go to work, I'll wait for your call. At this point, the call is completely over. Chris, Violet agreed. Baccarat looked at the man in front and said with a smile, but she needs to ask, because she doesn't know what we donated. Chris was wielding a blood-red 2.9 knife, spit out a word lightly. Karina looked at them with a sly look, and said with a smile, what do you think of this Violet? I feel that she seems to be very good, she should be able to dance, and she is very powerful. Corona floated in the air and asked curiously, why do you say that, where did you see it? Migi nodded and smiled, she's wearing a flamenco dance costume, and logically speaking, the dance distance must be very strong. Kaya has a simple mind and a sweet smile and said, I think Sister Violet is very good, she is very good at talking. She is a princess, but she has no pretense at all, she is gentle and generous, and she is always a good sister. I laughed, if I have the chance to meet her, I'll definitely make sure that her dancing is very beautiful, she's a special fan. 108. This is a map pointing to the devil fruit tree. New World, Kingdom of Dressrosa. Beside Chris, Wanren has such a powerful woman. It's really scary. Violet is holding a phone bug, and her flawless face is full of surprise. She really admires Baccarat's fruit ability. Very, very envious. But when she thought of Chris, she couldn't help but get a little mad at this guy. He was so cold-blooded that he was so mad at me. From childhood to adulthood, I have always been the apple of my eye. All men like me and treat me very well. Only this bastard didn't even want to connect to the phone, and asked Baccarat to do it for him. How can there be such a man in the world? I hate him. Violet shook her head, sighed, and stopped thinking about these messy things. The most important thing now is to find what Chris wants. This is the most important thing. She thought about it seriously, and there is no precious treasure around her. If you try Becca, it's definitely not there. It seems that the father should hide something from us. He must have a secret that he didn't tell us. Violet frowned and analyzed it carefully. Baccarat said so, then there must be something on his side. She believes that it is impossible for Baccarat to joke about this kind of thing and talk to her father, it can only be like this. Violet's eyes showed a firm look, and without hesitation, he walked directly out of the old place of the room, the base of the revolutionary army of King Liku, the flower field. At this time, the room is still the same, only the three kings of manpower, Rebecca and Violet. Violet, why are you contacting us again? King Liku sat on the chair, looked at his daughter seriously, and said in a deep voice, with such frequent contact, Juan was noticed by Doflamingo, have you thought about the consequences? Becca hurriedly waved her hand, with a sweet smile on her beautiful and refined face. She persuaded Master, my aunt looked for us, and she must have contacted Chris. Becca turned her head to look at Violet, and blinked. Blinking her beautiful eyes, she smiled and said, Auntie, I am not wrong. Violet leaned on the chair, with Erlang's legs, showing elegance and generosity, and said with a smile that I did contact Chris, and he agreed. Within 2 years, the bastard Doflamingo will be solved. Violet looked at King Riku, raised his eyebrows, and said with a wry smile, he made a request, and only if we agree to him, will we be willing to rescue Dre? Throsa. With the appearance of Violet, Rebecca hurriedly asked, curiously, Auntie, what request did Chris make? Is this asking too much, and that's why it bothers you? King Riku glanced at Violette, and said in an old voice what was his request. As long as the conditions weren't too extreme, the king could allow him Violet to brush his hair before he pulled out his forehead, and explained the situation with a slight smile. Beside Chris, there is a woman named Baccarat. She is a lucky fruit person and can feel the arrival of good anger. Violet looked at the two of them with a very serious look on her pretty face, and said, her intuition shows that we have something that Chris needs here. She couldn't tell what it was, but she knew that things must be in our hands. I thought about it, and I didn't know what she was talking about, so I came to discuss it with you. Violet looked at King Riku, and was silent for a while. Then he slowly asked, Father, Rebecca and I don't have anything important here. Are you hiding something from us, and I'd love to know what it is if you can. Hearing her words, Sugar Becca and King Riku were both shocked by the lucky fruit, that there is such a powerful evil house fruit. It's unbelievable. Becca came back to her senses and hurriedly looked at King Riku with a puzzled look on her face. She couldn't believe it and asked Grandpa, is what the mother said true? Are you directly hiding something from us? Grandpa, you are not such a person, right? King Riku didn't answer immediately, leaned back, sighed, and said to himself, if I guess right, what Chris wants is indeed in my hands. Really have. Violet and Rebecca looked at each other, and they both saw the surprise in each other's eyes. King Riku loved them very much, and made them think they were darlings and set a reason to hide their eyes from them. Man, I am really shocked that Becca's character is not so calm. Looking at King Riku, he snorted and became angry. Grandpa, you are still keeping a secret from us. I thought you loved us the most and I will ignore you in the future. I won't talk to you anymore. Violet rolled her eyes at her and said angrily, what are you talking about? Since the father doesn't tell us, he must have his reasons. Then, he turned his head to look at King Riku, with a gentle and pleasant smile on his pretty face, and asked curiously, Father, can you tell us now, what is it? King Riku waved his old big hand and smiled amiably, it's not Zhang Yinmen, you guys, this is the rule handed down from the ancestors. Years ago, our Riku family became the new royal family of Dressrosa. From then on, each generation of kings would pass a map to the next generation. King Shinriku shook his head, sighed and said, in my generation, all my daughters were born, so I didn't tell you to. Individual. Alas, this map is useless, and it's a good thing to give to my generation. Becca's beautiful eyes lit up, and her beautiful and delicate face immediately showed interest, and hurriedly asked Grandpa, what map is it, why is it so mysterious? 310 degrees has been handed down from 800 years ago to the present, which is simply a family heirloom. Violet nodded, with a complicated look on his pretty face, and murmured, in other words, Baccarat really predicted it. If she hadn't said it, I would never have known in my life that there was such a secret in the royal family. King Riku looked at the two of them with an amiable smile, and said in an old voice, this map is said to be Devil Fruit Tree can be found. Of course, this is passed down from ancestors 800 years ago. Whether it is or not, no one knows at all. In my opinion, the ancestors have been guarding such a map. It is really unnecessary. King Riku smiled and said with a certain tone, even if this map is real, so what is the tree of evil fruits, where did we grow up? This has nothing to do with us, we just need to know what we can do. This map is not complete, and other residual pictures need to be collected. In short, this is a useless map. King Riku looked at the two of them and said with a sincere smile, for various reasons, I didn't tell you about this, it's really unnecessary to say it. 109. Lord Chris, is this the map you want? I'll say. Rebecca looked at King Riku, her eyebrows were crescent-shaped, and she smiled sweetly and said, how could Grandpa hide from us? Grandpa loves us the most. Violet nodded, agreed with what Rebecca said, brushed the hair in front of his forehead, and smiled, Father, since this map is not very important, then leave it to Chris. It is undoubtedly a very good deal to exchange a map of little value for the safety of the entire Defus Rosa. King Liku frowned, with a worried look on his vicissitudes face, and said what the map gave to Chris, the well is not a big problem. What the father was worried about was whether after he got the map, he would turn his eyes and not recognize the person, and would not help us anymore. Ka nodded, touched his delicate chin, and analyzed it. He was right. This is indeed worth thinking about. Chris, he asked for things first, and then agreed to help us, which is too bad for us. If he took the map and ran away, we couldn't do anything about him. Becca looked at Violet and winked beautifully. Eyes, smiled and said, Auntie, do you have a better way? Violet shrugged, with a bitter smile on her pretty face, but said helplessly that you don't understand Chris's character. He is too strong and domineering, and he is not allowed to question him or bargain at all. Since he said that, then we can only do this. There is no other possibility. You look at King Liku and Becca, and say with a very serious face, but I can guarantee that he will not go out and go to Baccarat. The lucky fruit person, I will not doubt him. Becca nodded and said with a smile, speaking of which, since he knows that we have something in our hands, he can definitely contact Brother Doflamming. So, our things cannot be preserved, and they will also be taken away by him. So, I agree with my aunt, I can give the map to Chris Diaresis L. King Liku frowned, and his old eyelids showed a contemplative look. At the end of analyzing the pros and cons, he sighed and sighed with emotion. Great it, then give it to him. After all, this is the only hope. If you miss this time, you will never have another chance in the future. Who is Doflamingo, the king of the underground world, with a great reputation, shocking the whole sea? Chris was the only one who dared to challenge him. King Liku turned to Violet to the right, and said with a serious face, you should contact him now, agree to his request, and Becca and I will sit here to make sure that the situation is going on. That's right, Grandpa and I are here to check to see if Chris really wants to help us. Auntie, call quickly, I will observe carefully. Violet shook his head and said with a wry smile, you think too much, love is not like this, call over, it must be Bacca to answer. Will be Chris. After he finished speaking, he took out the phone bug and placed it on the desk. Rebecca waved his hand and urged him without caring. Auntie, don't care who answers the phone, it's the right call anyway. I've already got a lot of energy. Violet, who will definitely observe carefully, gave her address, and said angrily, it's still so quirky, it'll never grow up. After talking, there's no likeness. Dialed out. Chris, in the training room. You say, will Violet call again? Perona floated in the air, looked at them, and asked curiously. Karina leaned on the chair, crossed her legs, smiled disdainfully, and said with certainty, it's needless to say, I will definitely contact you. Nuachi nodded high, stroked her blue hair, and smiled slightly. Didn't Chris say that Doflamingo is not a Yin Chihuahua? There is Sichung Kaido behind him, who would dare to challenge him? Even those monsters in the New World didn't dare to confront Doflamingo head-on. Nami blinked his eyes, touched Bai's chin, and said seriously, that's true. Not only is he the king of the underground world, but he is also connected to the world government. Nami, who is black and white, holds her small hand with an excited look on her face. A pirate like him is really too shrewd to live, too. Great. Needy writer, said gently and generously. Although he lives very shrewdly, Chris said that he is destined to be eliminated by the times. After becoming the king of Dressrosa, he became arrogant and arrogant. He didn't work hard to cultivate, and his strength stopped. The wave of the new era came, and he couldn't survive at all. Pushing the city is where he should stay. Kino shook his head slightly, and said in awe, although Chris's words are few, every time she talks about the point, it is very philosophical. Kia nodded her head heavily, and said twice, ignoring the man in front of her, her beautiful eyes filled with admiration, Lord Chris, who is the best young man in the world. Sweetheart Queen looked at them and said with a smile, so you don't have to think too much, it won't be long before she will call, there is no doubt about that. Unless she didn't want to save Dressrosa. Then when I didn't say anything, a crisp voice rang out. Blue blue blue. The girls looked at each other and laughed together. Carmen folded her arms in front of her and said with a smile, "What are you talking about? It must be Violet's phone call." Betty, who took a breath and remained calm as always, she must be more anxious than us, which is normal. Baccarat did not hesitating, he quickly picked up the receiver and connected the call. "My name is Violet." The phone bug imitated her appearance, and she was still so beautiful and generous, showing the noble couple of a princess of a country, Yarabeka and King Liku, both looking at the phone bug. "Violette, I have been waiting for your call. The phone bug just now. As soon as it rang, I guessed it was you. Well, have you asked your father, did you find it?" Qian. The girls didn't speak, all of them pricked up their ears. All of them were very curious, eager to know the answer. Violet nodded, eyebrows curved, and said generously, "I found it, Sister Baccarat. I asked my father. It turns out that what Lord Chris wants is actually a map. This is a residual map. If Ziki is complete, then you can find the devil fruit tree." Violet leaning on the chair and leaning up. Ruo Erlang's legs immediately showed an extremely attractive figure, which looked really intoxicating. "Sister Baccarat, please ask Lord Chris, is this what he wants? If not, I will continue to look for it here. No matter what, please rest assured that Chris-sama will be satisfied." "I'm sorry to bother you, Sister Baccarat." 110. In 10 minutes, Chris will be in Dressrosa. Is it a residual picture, and it still points to the devil fruit tree? The girls froze for a moment, and then a happy smile appeared on their eyelids. They all knew that among the things Chris needed, there was the devil fruit tree, which was great. I didn't expect it to be this. Karina's beautiful eyes were shining, her pretty face was full of smiles, and she said something excitedly. Nami nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, this is really something to celebrate." Maggie Nuo smiled slightly, politely. "Chris has been looking for the location of the tree of evil fruit tree, now that this matter is a bit of an eye." Ju leaned against Yuzi, crossed Erlang's legs, touched her delicate chin with her jade hand, and said something with a smile. "I originally thought that we would have to wait until we entered the Great Waterway before we can get news of this aspect. It seems that our luck is really not that good." Carmen looked at the man in front and said with a smile, "Chris, there are evil consequences. Tree news. Why don't you come and listen? Stop cultivating first." The Queen Sweetheart shrugged her shoulders and smiled wryly at Chris, who was still slashing her sword. "Our captain is really heartbroken. No matter what happens, he always has the same expression, just like a robot. If this matter is put on normal people, who would not be excited?" 483. He is the only one who doesn't care, doesn't care. Betty took a breath and said with a sneer, "You know the spectrum, this guy is helpless anyway. I've looked at it, don't expect him to show surprise, or other expressions, he's like a wood, emotionless." Needy turned to her right, smiled and said, "It's not as exaggerated as you said, Chris is also emotional. At the banquet a few days ago, didn't Chris smile? It's not as scary as you said." Chris waved his sword and said calmly, "Tell her, the map, I want Baccarat to follow Chris for so long now." Knowing what he meant, he smiled and said, "Violet, things are in your hand." Up. The other side paused for a while and did not answer immediately. Violette looked at King Riku without speaking. He asked with his eyes. King Riku nodded without making a sound, and responded. "Sister Baccarat, the things are here with me, when will you come and get them?" Violet brushed the hair in front of his forehead and said sincerely, "If possible, I hope you can come over earlier so that we can finalize the matter, and we don't have to think too much. So please tell Chris Dajan, please." Baccarat. Sister Baccarat didn't need to ask Chris at all. She said with a smile, "Violet, where are you now? Say a precise location so that Chris can find the 3 people across from you." Hearing Baccarat's words, they were all stunned and didn't respond. Chris is coming to find her. How is this possible? Everyone looked at each other with a puzzled look, and couldn't understand Sister Baccarat. Aren't you guys in the East China Sea? Why did Chris come to find me? Violet frowned her pretty willow eyebrows, her pretty face covered with confused. He asked curiously, I don't understand this, Sister Baccarat. Baccarat waved his hand gently, his eyebrows were curved, and he said with a gentle smile, you don't need to worry about this, just report an accurate address. As for what's going on, you'll find out later. Hearing Baccarat say this, Violet couldn't continue to ask, and Rabbit had to arouse her disgust. Mei looked at King Liku and Enbeka, and made eye contact. King Liku didn't know why Baccarat said that, but after thinking about it, he didn't say anything, and pointed directly to the donation. Nebeka looked at Violet, nodded slightly, and agreed with Mrs. Baccarat, I am in the flower field in Dressrosa. There is a sunflower here, very beautiful. Span. Violet's beautiful eyes flow, and her smile is dignified and noble. Said, when you are free next time, remember to come to Dre. Throws a watch, guaranteed to satisfy you. Tell her 10 minutes to. With a bang, Chris disappeared instantly, and the disappearing figure saw Chris open high. The girls looked at each other. Speechless Karina shrugged her shoulders, complained, and said, still so decisive, hello. Don't say a word, you'll be there in 10 minutes. Carmen shook his head and sighed, it's rare to see him being so active, it seems that Chris attaches great importance to this map. The sweetheart queen frowned and said, getting there in 10 minutes means that Chris must be on his way with all his strength. Baccarat knew that Chris must be getting older, and he gave 10 minutes, which must be the longest time. Surely in less than 10 minutes, he would appear at the flower field point in Dressrosa. Baccarat firmly believed that. Violet, wait there for a while. In 10 minutes, Chris will arrive at Baccarat, as dignified and classical as always. Ying said with a smile, as for specific things, you can talk to him face to face, don't worry too much. Although he is domineering and strong, he is actually very talkative. If you have any requirements, just talk to him directly. Well, I won't say much about the rest. Let's chat with Chris. Listening to Baccarat's words, the three of them were completely stunned. They couldn't react and arrived in 10 minutes. What does this mean? How is it possible to come so soon? Impossible. No, Sister Baccarat. Violet came back to his senses and just wanted to speak, but found that the phone had already been turned off. After the call was over, he shook his head, smiled wryly, and said, hang up the phone so soon, nothing has been explained clearly. Wong and Becca wrinkled their eyebrows, their pretty eyelids covered with doubts, asked just now if she said that Chris would come in 10 minutes. I heard this right. Rebecca shrugged, with a helpless expression on her beautiful and delicate eyelids, and said, I also heard that it was indeed 10 minutes. But how is this possible? How can others come here in the East China Sea? Could it be that Chris and the others have been joking with us and have no plans to save Dressrosa? Becca, shaking his head, frowning slightly, and directly overturning his own statement. It's not right, looking at Baccarat's appearance, it doesn't look like that. Just kidding, she is very serious, but to appear here in 10 minutes, it only means that Chris is in Dressrosa, and this is the only possibility. Having said that, the voice stopped abruptly, a look of horror appeared on the pretty face, and he murmured, if he is in Dressrosa, would this be a conspiracy? He won't join forces with Doflamingo, auntie and grandfather on the way to the flower field. Do you think it will be like this? When Becca looked at the two of them, she hurriedly said, let's get out of here quickly, let's retreat first and then talk about it. 111. Violet, Rebecca, I can answer your 3 questions. What are you talking about? Violet rolled her eyes at her and said angrily, if Chris really teamed up with Doflamingo, then they attacked directly. How could they tell us that it would be reached in 10 minutes? Besides, I still believe that Baccarat is a person. She can't deceive us. After listening to Violet, Becca said, her beautiful eyes lit up, her head suddenly realized and she patted her heart. She breathed a sigh of relief, and said with a sweet smile, then I can rest assured, I'll be fine. But what does Baccarat mean by this? what does it mean to reach within 10 minutes? King Liku frowned. He said with a serious face, I'm afraid there is indeed a problem here. Maybe we already have Telukris and Doflamingo. It is very likely that we will leave here for the time being to make sure everything is safe on the way. If no abnormality is found later, come back at that time. Violet quickly waved his hand and said eagerly, Father, don't rush to retreat. You have forgotten my ability. I can see the situation within 4,000 kilometers, and I can grasp any troubles in time. I'll go out and check the situation now. As long as Doflamingo is in King's Heights, then it means we're not exposed and it's safe. Hanbecca's beautiful eyes lit up, her beautiful and delicate face burst into a sweet and pleasant smile, and her voice was sweet and excited, saying yes, Auntie's fruit ability, but super powerful, can not only see through other people's hearts, but also observe a few. The situation thousands of kilometers away, Stains, don't worry about it now. King Liku also reacted, nodded, and said with a smile, Violet's ability is indeed very powerful. It is the most suitable for spying on the enemy. All right, if that's the case, you can go out and observe the system. Once you find a problem, please come back and notify in time, don't delay. Violet didn't believe that Chris would do this at all, but King Liku said so, and she could only go out for a while. After brushing the hair in front of his forehead, he said with tears in his eyes, Okay, I see. You wait here in peace, don't worry about anything, it's all right. I went up to take a look, and immediately came down. After we finished talking, I slowly stood up, walked towards the door with graceful steps, and suddenly, a faint voice sounded in the room. Violet, are you leaving without a map? With a bang, Chris' figure suddenly appeared at the door. The air instantly quieted down. There was no sound from the three of them in the room. They were completely shocked. Very handsome, about 188 centimeters tall. With a calm temperament, his body exudes the aura of a strong man, and he looks very mysterious. When Becca pointed at Chris, her beautiful eyes widened, and her face was full of horror, and she said intermittently, a sentence. You or Chris. Violet also came back to his senses, his eyes widened to the maximum, and Chao Xian showed a shocked look, and murmured, what's going on here? King Liku sat up straight, his vicissitudes face also showed a look of surprise, and said in disbelief, how did you appear? Also, how did you know about this place? This place is my revolutionary base. No outsiders know about it, how would you know? It was so shocking that the old man, King Liku, couldn't calm down at all. He asked several questions in a row. Chris looked at the three of them and said calmly as always, didn't Baccarat tell you just now, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Get here. The three looked at each other, and the horror in each other's eyes was incredible. The three of them still couldn't turn their heads, and they were dizzy. Violet rubbed her smooth forehead. She felt that her head was not enough, and she needed to be surprised by the delicate and elegant danger the color, said quickly. Lord Chris, let me ask one by one. Could you please answer the question? Violet looked at Chris, shook his head, and said with a wry smile, the three of us, we still don't understand the situation, it's completely. Becca nodded again and again, like a chicken pecking at rice, and hurriedly followed, yes, I don't even know what to say now. The mood is so complicated that I don't know how to describe it. Anyway, it's shocking. King Liku should be more sophisticated. He gradually stabilized his mind, calmed down, and asked with a frown. Let me ask you a question first. Mr. Chris, are you? How did you know about this place? Others are old and sophisticated, and they deeply understand a truth. Ask for flowers and gifts, you must ask for something. Since asking Chris for help, the attitude has to be sincere and show enough respect. This has nothing to do with age, it is simply to agree with the strong Becca and Violet. They all nodded, and Mei watched this mysterious man carefully, waiting for him to give an answer. I know a lot more than you think. Chris still put his hands in his trouser pockets and said lightly, when your strength reaches a certain level, you will know what the answer is. For the sake of the map, I can answer your 2 more questions. After thinking about it clearly, when people look at each other again, they can understand. It's very cold, he won't say a word of nonsense, and the whole person who is unsmiling is very cold and ruthless. Ask the 2 of you, just one of you. King Liku leaned against the chair and rubbed his forehead. He needed to take a break. He was old and couldn't stand the emotional fluctuations, so he left it to 2 young people to tie. Rebecca and Violet looked at each other, and Violet still had a look of surprise on their pretty faces. Blinking her beautiful hair, she said with a gentle and dignified smile, "Let me ask first, and you will ask questions later." I was just thinking about what question I wanted to ask. Rebecca nodded lightly, her eyes were curved, her smile was sweet and cute, she was so good-looking. Violette turned her head to look at this powerful young man, wrinkled and slender willow leaves, and her flawless face was full of smiles. Full of doubts, he asked, "Chris-sama, were you in the East China Sea just now?" Chris was expressionless, still so calm, and said directly, "Yes, I just arrived here from the East China Sea," and the 3 of them were shocked again. What does Chris mean by this? Just now, people were in the East China Sea, and in less than 10 minutes, people appeared in the kingdom of Dressrosa in the New World. How is this possible? How far is it from the East China Sea to the New World? The 3 of them didn't know what to say anymore, and they all stared at Chris, as if they had lost their souls and couldn't wake up at all. The room was so quiet that even if a needle fell to the ground, it could be heard clearly. 112, Lord Chris, let my daughter and granddaughter accompany you. How is this possible? Violet shook his head like a rattle, with an extremely beautiful white face, covered in horror, and murmured that it took 10 minutes to come here from the East China Sea. This is impossible, who can do it? This is not something that can be done by human beings, and certainly cannot be done. Suddenly, Violet reacted, and Chao Xian was full of apology. Meimu looked at Chris with a very embarrassed look. Chris-sama, I'm not questioning you, I'm really too shocked, it feels too incredible. King Liku and Enbeka didn't speak, they nodded again and agreed. Chris still put his hands in his trouser pockets, still so calm, and said lightly, "The last question." The 3 of them couldn't help but look at each other, and they all saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. This young man in front of him is really too cold, he cherishes words like gold, and doesn't say a word of nonsense. This makes the 3 of them feel very uncomfortable. There is always a feeling of depression, really very uncomfortable. Violet looked at Rebecca, shook her head slightly, threw all her emotions out of her mind, smiled and said, "You ask, after asking, you have to get down to business." "Okay, I already know what to ask." Becca turned her head to look at this mysterious man, with 12 curved eyebrows, a gentle and pleasant smile on her delicate face, and said something in a sweet voice. "Chris, it took you less than 10 minutes to get here from the East China Sea. I want to ask, Lord Chris, how did you do it? You're just curious." Violet and King Liku looked at Chris with curiosity, eager to know the answer. Chris was as cold as always, his voice was as calm as water, and he said, "I ate the fruit of rejection and developed a move ability, space rejection. Using the space shuttle, you can get here in 10 minutes. Okay, what's the matter? I'll talk about it later." Chris looked at the 3 of them and said indifferently, "Now, give me the map first. Repel fruit, reject space." People were once again shocked by what Chris said. There are people who can pierce through the space. This is really incredible, people can't believe it at all. At this moment, the 3 of them felt that the young man in front of them was so powerful and mysterious. The eyes of Chris turned to the right, showing more and more respect and humility. This is respect for the strong. "Lord Chris, please wait a moment." King Liku quickly stood up and bowed to Chris, with a look of guilt on his vicissitudes face, and hurriedly said, "You're coming so fast that the map hasn't come. Please wait a few minutes and I'll go get it." After speaking, I didn't dare to hesitate, and strode to the door. At this time, there were only 3 people left in the room, Violet, Rebecca, and Chris. Violet looked at Chris, Her beautiful eyes blinked, a sweet and gentle smile appeared on her pretty face, and she said, "Lord Chris, you are inviting me to sit down." Becca also reacted, hurriedly facing Chris, smiled sweetly and said, "Lord Chris, let's sit down and talk, don't stand." Chris didn't speak, nodded slightly, and walked straight over. Without saying a word, Violet hurriedly pulled the chair away, extremely respectful, and said with a smile, "Sir Chris, please take a seat." "Sit down, don't be so polite." Chris waved his hand and his voice was calm. Okay Chris Big." Violet and Camp Becca nodded quickly and sat down quickly. This time, Chris spoke first, looked at the two of them, and asked directly, "How did you get this map?" Hearing Chris's question, Violet and Rebecca said together, "We both looked at each other and laughed and thought it was very interesting. A mature, a pure, or all proper pictures of big beauties, it is really beautiful." "Auntie, your thinking is clearer, you should talk to Lord Chris." Becca looked at Violet, blinked beautifully, smiled sweetly and gently and said something. Violet nodded lightly, then turned to look at Chris, and said with a smile, "This is the situation, Lord Chris. 800 years ago, after our Liku family became the new royal family of Dressrosa, this map has been handed down all the time, and finally in the hands of my father." Violet plucked his black and beautiful hair. With a sigh, there was a look of pity on the pretty face, and it was a pity that this was just a residual picture, not complete. "If you want to find the devil fruit, you need to find other afterimages." Violet looked at Chris with beautiful eyes, smiled and said, "But I believe that Lord Chris will definitely decide all the maps. For this, I am very convinced that you can absolutely do it." Rebecca nodded her head, with a big smile on her face, and continued, "Yes, Chris is so powerful, he can definitely do it. Speaking of which, no one knows what the devil fruit tree looks like." Becca's pretty face is full of yearning, and she is very longing, and murmurs, "If you have the chance, I will really go and see this magical fruit tree. It must be a very beautiful and attractive big tree." Chris leaned on the chair, crossed his legs, put his arms around him, calmly said, "If you are interested, I can show you the tree of evil fruits when you find it. Go together." Da. Violet and Becca, their beautiful eyes lit up instantly, and their pretty faces showed surprises. They were very excited. Chris didn't say much. He nodded slightly. It was great to respond. "Thank you, Chris. Grown-ups." Without saying a word, Rebecca quickly applauded. Her eyebrows curved into a crescent shape. Her smile was sweet and pleasant, and she quickly said that you are really a good person. "Thank you so much, hee." Violet nodded, blinked his beautiful eyes, and said with a sweet smile, "No wonder Sister Baccarat specially explained something sweet. Till 2:30 I said that although you look cold, you are actually very talkative, and you are not as good as you look. Now it seems that this is the case. It is exactly the same as what Sister Baccarat said." At this time, there was a knock on the door, reminded. With a crunch, the wooden door slowly opened, only to see King Liku holding a black box and striding towards Chris. This is something that has been passed down for 800 years. When Becca was innocent and lively, when she saw the black box in King Liku's hand, her beautiful eyes were bright, and her pretty eyelids were full of curiosity. King Liku stood beside Chris, respectfully placed the box on the desk, and said very humbly, "Master Chris, this is the map you want." "I'm sorry Chris, I still have a few things to deal with, so I'll let my daughter and granddaughter be here with you." Chris was still so calm, he didn't even look at King Riku, and said lightly, "Go ahead." And Violet was stunned for a while. "I don't understand why King Riku did this. Chris is extremely important to them. Riku is extremely important. Wong is not here to accompany him, and what is he going out to do? What is going on at the moment? He can be compared with Chris." At this moment, Violet was really confused and couldn't understand what King Liku was doing. 113. Violet, Rebecca, you all become Chris's women. Xiaobeika's mind was simple and didn't think much at all. She said with a smile, "Grandpa, you are a busy person, just go ahead and do it." With me and my aunt here, that's enough. King Liku nodded and glanced at the two of them with deep meaning. The vicissitudes of life showed a amiable line. Let's chat with you young people, I'll go back to work first. After speaking, without any hesitation, he walked directly to the door with a squeak. The wooden door slowly closed, and King Liku stood at the door with a look of hope in his eyes and prayed secretly in his heart, thinking, Violet, Lumbeka, you have to cheer up. No matter which one of you, being Chris woman is a huge help to Liku. Chris is so young and his strength is so powerful, he must be a big man in the future. It is your honor and a great joy to be his woman. King Liku frowned, with a determined look on his old face, and said to himself, if Chris wants, it's not a problem for both of them to marry him. Such a powerful young man must be firmly grasped in his hands and must not be missed. As long as Chris becomes my daughter, he will definitely help Dressrosa and bring great benefits to the country. That's right, I have to talk to the two of them when I look back, and explain that I must become the woman of Chris. King Riku, with a smile on his face, very happy, and strode forward into the room. At this time, Violet had already fully reacted, and she finally knew why King Liku did this. This is the woman Ming who planned to make her Chris. Father, are you so anxious to send your daughter out? Violet secretly complained about King Lisho. He had never seen a father who did this. How could he put his daughter on another man? Well, she just complained, well, not very angry. Maimyu glanced at Chris. She was still very satisfied with this man at a young age, with such a strong strength, and with such a handsome appearance. Overly domineering. However, as a strong man, it is understandable that Chris would behave like this. Is he really my real son? Violet really wanted to take a 0K pose in front of his eyes and peep into Chris's inner thoughts. But she doesn't dare, it's just an idea. Actually, Chris is stronger than Doflamingo. If he peeps rashly, he will definitely be noticed by him. At that time, it will be a big trouble, and it will definitely let Chris, I want to see this map, can you let me see it together? At this time, Becca looked at Chris. Her beautiful eyes were shining, her face was extremely beautiful, she showed a look of anticipation, and she asked. Chris was about to open the black box and said calmly, after you can finish speaking, just open the box and take out the quaint and old map inside. Thank you, Lord Chris. Becca's beautiful eyes lit up, a sweet smile appeared on her pretty face, and she said happily, I knew, Lord Chris, you are the best. Without further ado, he quickly stood up and walked quickly to Chris's side. He was very excited. Violet pulled up his black and beautiful hair, smiled and said, I'll take a look together. After all, this has been around for more than 800 years. The map is definitely seen by the whole world. Slowly stood up, took noble and elegant steps, and came to Chris's side. Is this the map pointing to the tree of evil fruits? Becca stood beside Chris Fang, bent down slightly, and her slim and attractive figure suddenly appeared. Long pink hair, delicate and perfect face, without any acne, it is really beautiful to wear. The route is very complicated. Violet also stood beside Chris, bent over to look at the map, come on Lu Yiju, and whispered that this figure was much better than Rebecca's black and beautiful hair. The exquisite 5 palaces, coupled with her status as a dancer, how slender her figure is, can't be described at all. Must be mind-blowing, no doubt about that. Complexity is inevitable. Chris crossed his legs and held the map in both hands. He watched carefully and said calmly without blinking. A place no one has ever reached. In this life, I will conquer there, and I will succeed in uncovering the mystery of the devil fruit tree. Although the tone is flat, but there is no doubt about it. It shook the hearts of both of them. Becca looked at Chris, her beautiful eyes were full of brilliance, and on the verge of being beautiful and fair, there was a sweet joker, and she nodded heavily. Lord Chris, I am sure you will do it. From childhood to adulthood, you are the most powerful man I have ever met. What others can't do, you can definitely do, I firmly believe that. Violet gathered her black and beautiful hair and looked at Chris with a different emotion in her eyes. With a dignified and gentle smile on her pretty face, she nodded and said in agreement, "BCAH, I think so too. Lord Chris, your strength is so powerful, I believe that in this world, there will be no more powerful young people than you. Coupled with the lucky fruit of Sister Baccarat, she will always bring you good luck and let you do things smoothly." Violet blinked his beautiful eyes, and said with a slight smile, "So, you can definitely do it, come on, Lord Chris." Hearing the praise and encouragement from the two of them, Chris rarely showed a faint smile, put away the map and said a word. "Okay, I'm satisfied. Next, let's talk about our cooperation." Hearing him mention the business, the two of them reacted instantly and said in unison, "Okay." Lord Chris didn't hesitate, sat down quickly and entered the topic. Chris looked at the two of them, his eyes were indifferent, and he said calmly, "At most 2 years, I will help you solve Doflamingo and completely liberate Dressrosa. After that, whether we will continue to cooperate, wait until then and talk about your ideas, including the requirements, let's discuss." Hearing this, Violet and Rebecca both showed a look of relief. They waited for so long, that is to wait for this sentence. Now that Chris has made a promise, then everything will not be a problem in 2 years, Doflamingo must die. They really admire Chris' strength too much, and they won't doubt anything at all. Rebecca was naive and lively, she held up her little hand, and said with great excitement, "This damn Doflamingo is finally finished, he he he." Violet nodded, looked at Chris carefully, and said with a sweet smile, "As long as Lord Chris takes action, he will definitely not survive. Dressrosa, I'm finally going to turn over. This is really gratifying, Mr. Chris. We have no other requirements, but wait for the time to come. That's all. In the next 2 years, we will be completely hidden. No longer fight against Doflamingo, and wait for your arrival with peace of mind." Violet blinked Chen Mei's eyes and smiled sweetly, "Also, Lord Chris, if we run into trouble here next. At that time, can we call you for help?" "Don't worry, we won't call you unless we have to." Chris nodded slightly, and said calmly as always, "Yes. If you have no other requirements, so be it." After speaking, I stood up and prepared to leave here. Violet and Rebecca knew that Chris was going to leave, so they quickly stood up, and their beautiful eyes fell on him. "Man, you are leaving." Rebecca's eyes widened. Without blinking, she said curiously, "I really want to see how you reject space. I didn't notice when you came just now. This time, I must see it clearly, I won't miss a single bit." Violet nodded and stared at Bryony as well, with a serious expression on her pretty face, and said the same to me. "This is a shuttle space, something that no one has ever been able to do before. You must see clearly that." Chris ignored them and spit out 2 words. "As soon as you leave, the world disappears in place, and you can never find him again." Figure 114. Violet makes a decision to go after Chris. Shock. Very shaky. Violet and Rebecca instantly widened their beautiful eyes, staring blankly at the place where Chris stood just now, a look of horror. I couldn't react at all, I was scared stupid. Unbelievable, Chris's exclusion space is too powerful. The room was quiet, and there was no sound for a long time. Awesome. Rebecca stared blankly ahead, with a look of surprise on her beautiful and fair face, and murmured, "This is the so-called exclusionary space, it's scary. Lord Chris, he is really amazing. I admire him so much." Violet slapped his head, and his pretty eyelids were covered with complicated looks. Although he knew that what he said was stupid, he knew that it was a time. It's another thing to see. Such a bizarre thing, who would dare to believe it? There are people who can travel through space. Sure enough, Chris is the strongest, he will definitely be able to defeat Doflamingo and save Dressrosa. Violet clenched his small fists and said excitedly, 2 years, at most 2 years, we can live a good life, and we won't have to suffer so much anymore. Damn Duo 963 inches Brother Flamin, your doomsday is coming, then I will kill you with my own hands to take revenge for your mother. The copyright of the novel resource belongs to the original author. The text is only for personal study and trial reading. Please download it here. After deleting it within 24 hours, please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy. This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel internal group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. Rebecca nodded heavily, and said, "Me too, I will also take revenge at that time, so I can't spare this bastard lightly. When he encounters a man as powerful as Chris, he will definitely fail miserably. There is no other possibility." Becca looked at Violet, blinked her beautiful eyes, and asked with a smile, "Auntie, what do you think of Chris? How are people?" Violet sat on the chair, with Erlang's legs on his wings, noble and elegant, graceful and luxurious. "Of course, he is very powerful, very good. Anyway, since childhood, I have never seen a better man than him. Really, it's too powerful." Violet held her chin in her hand, looked up and down at Becca, smiled and said, "Why, do you have any thoughts about him? Not to mention, you are not too different in age, it is indeed very suitable. How about, do you want my aunt to help you pull the strings and let the two of you come together? You see, Chris is so handsome, powerful, and so stable, mature, will definitely be able to become a big man in the future." Violet was about to continue speaking when Rebecca made a sound and hit her directly. The copyright of the novel resource belongs to the original author. The text is only for personal study and trial reading. Please delete it within 24 hours after downloading. Please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy. This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel internal group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. Recommended. Becca rolled her eyes at her, snorted, and said angrily, "How old I am? How can I talk to someone? Auntie, don't talk nonsense. As for you, you are in your 20s, you really should hurry up and not delay it any longer." Rebecca touched her delicate chin, blinked her eyes with a sly look, and said with a smile, "Auntie, I think you and Chris are very married. Why don't you try to chat with him about me? Feel it. The two of you must be very suitable, and you will definitely be able to come together and live a happy and beautiful life. With such a powerful uncle as Chris, it is very interesting to think about it. How wonderful that at that time, who would dare to bully me, and what a cue when I go out." Becca moved her body forward a little, her face full of excitement, and said quickly, "How about it, Auntie? What I said makes sense, right? Don't hesitate, just settle down like this. From today onwards, you will pursue Chris." At this moment, there is a knock on the door, only to hear King Ku respectfully say, "Lord Chris, I can come in." Rebecca and Violet looked at each other and laughed together. "Father, come in." Violet looked in the direction of the door and said something with a smile. Rebecca shrugged her shoulders and said with a sigh, "My father really respects Chris. I feel that the style of painting is a bit weird." King Liku came over with an amiable smile. "This is respect for the strong. There is nothing strange in the sea. Never look at age, everything speaks with strength." "How long has Reese been gone?" Violet tucked her hair together and said with a slight smile, "It's not too long, just a few minutes." "Father, I have already negotiated with Chris, and he will definitely deal with Brother Doflamming within 2 years. So for the next period of time, we will still hide and wait for the arrival in 2 years with peace of mind. What do you think, Father?" However, Becca nodded again and agreed, "Yes, yes, since Chris said so, there must be no problem. Grandpa, let's just relax and have a good rest for 2 years, okay? You have been busy dealing with things recently, and you haven't been with me much. If this happens, I will be angry." King Liku sat on the chair and said with a smile, "Take a 2-year break, this is no problem. I can promise you that there is absolutely no problem with Chris' help anyway. I am very relieved about this, and now I will talk about other things." King Liku looks at the two of them with vicissitudes on their faces. He showed a serious expression and said in a deep voice, "You must know how powerful Chris is. He is too important to us. we must hold it firmly in our hands and maintain the relationship. And if you want to maintain a relationship, marriage is undoubtedly the best way. Violet and Rebecca, I plan to let one of you marry Chris and become his woman. King Liku said with a look of hope. As long as there is someone married to Chris, then he will definitely help us all the time. Dressaro will definitely develop rapidly. Okay, the two of you, let's have a good chat and discuss it. Having said that, King Liku stood up, turned his back on the two of them, and sighed, if you really don't like Chris, then treat it as if I didn't say it. However, sometimes it is impossible to make a little sacrifice for the sake of the country. Sigh. After finishing speaking, he shook his head and strode towards the door. The shadow looked a little sullen and full of sense of falling. Silent. The room fell into silence for a while. Just now, the two of them were actually joking, making fun of each other. They didn't mean it at all. But now, Liku Wang Wanren turned their jokes into reality. It's too incredible. I thought my father would not say these words, but I didn't expect it would be better to speak up, alas Tilda. Violet rubbed her forehead and sighed, her pretty face showing a helpless look when Becca hadn't reacted from what King Liku said. Hearing Violet's words again, he was even more puzzled. He frowned and asked inexplicably, Auntie, did you find something? Also, how could Grandpa say such things? We have all cooperated with Chris, why do we need when to marry? Grandpa is doing something wrong, he said something wrong. Violet shook his head and said with a wry smile, haven't you understood yet? Just now, the father was not busy with business at all, he deliberately walked away. For what? Don't you just want us to be alone with Chris and create conditions for the two of us? You really think he has something to do? How is that possible? Becca is a smart woman, she knew what was going on as soon as she heard it, and she got a little angry. Let him give up the thoughts and feelings just now, how can he force it? This is too much. Becca looked at Violet and said angrily, Auntie, we absolutely cannot agree. We must strictly refuse to look at Becca's cute appearance. Violet smiled and waved his hand. I don't think you want to. It's so serious, it's actually pretty good. For such an excellent young man as Chris, many women must like him, there is no doubt about this. As for me, I am actually quite interested in him, and I plan to get to know him well and try to get along with him. Violet tucked her hair together, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said jokingly, Don't tell me, you don't like him, my aunt knows, you must like him too, that's right. Nebeka snorted and said angrily, I just think he's very powerful, I admire him very much, how can I like his aunt? Don't talk nonsense, I don't think so. The face asked curiously, Auntie, you really like Chris, are you kidding? 5.3 Violet shook his head slightly, smiled bitterly and said, I can't tell, anyway, I have a good impression of him. I'll try to get along with him later, and then I'll take a look at the situation. Rebecca's beautiful eyes lit up, it is excitement, not a try, but a certain success. Auntie, let Chris be my uncle, don't hesitate, you must chase him hard, come on. Violet rolled her eyes at her and said angrily, Don't mix it up, my aunt will make the decision by herself. I've been out for a while, it's time to go back, so as not to arouse Doflamingo's suspicion. After speaking, she stood up, walked towards the door with elegant and noble steps, and cheered, Auntie, make sure to catch Chris, and Becca looked at Violet's back swelling with beautiful eyes. With a sly color, Xiaodi made a joke, especially innocent and cute. Violet snorted, didn't say anything, just opened the door and left here. 115. Hancock made a name in the New World and became a role model for all women. 4 days later. Chris, in the training room. Erida, I don't know what's going on, every time I stay with you, I feel like I touch your skin. Karina looks at her, her beautiful eyes express her envy, and she murmurs, I see among the people who have passed, you have the best skin, you are really beautiful. Perona flew around in the air, nodded her head, and was also very envious. Yes, the princess likes this skin very much, Haley ha 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 ming. Since Erida got on the boat, everyone has been the same, except for admiration or envy. Nami looked at her, blinked her big eyes, and said with a slight smile, as a woman, Alrita really succeeded. Alrita rolled her eyes at them and said angrily, I've said it several times, this it is the credit of the slippery fruit, what do you admire so much? In the past, I was fat, freckled, a proper ugly girl, ugly and beautiful, and looked at the busy man in front of me, and made an elegant and generous smile on the delicate adventure. Thanks Chris, he helped me. It turned out that because of Chris's bounty, the number of pirates in the East China Sea increased. In a battle, Alrita was defeated, and she reached the slippery fruit on her way. After that, she became so beautiful and her skin was amazing. Then, a few days ago, I met the Chris at sea. Needless to say, it must be the effect of the fruit of evil on the ship, but it is really enviable. I really want to have such a good 12 sweetheart. The queen touched Alrita's jade hand, shook her head, her pretty face was full of emotion, and said this skin, stains, I don't know how to describe it, I really want too much. Yes. Betty took a breath, and she rarely showed a hint of hope. Although the old lady didn't care much about her appearance, if she could have such good skin. The old lady will definitely be very happy, every day is in a good mood and happy. Megang stroked her pale blonde hair and said with a smile, let's put it this way, only Sha is a woman and will envy Alrita, this is inevitable. The door nodded, turned to Alrita to the right, and joked, don't say, you are so beautiful, I'm in love with you. Alrita, how about it, let's sleep together in the future, okay? Makino frowned, smiled gently, and said very gently, there are many people who want to sleep with her, but I'm afraid you don't have one. This opportunity. Kaya nodded again and again, with a pure and sweet smile, yes, I just wanted to sleep with Sister Arita, and she agreed to. Sister Alip, isn't it? Arita stroked Kia's hair, and said with a smile, who made you so cute, my sister likes you very much, so I'll give you this chance. Leiju ignored their conversation, looked at Baccarat, and said something in a generous manner. Boya Hancock, it's so fast. We are still in the East China Sea and have not entered the Great Waterway. But she has entered the New World. The most important thing is that she has also made a name. It is really amazing. Baccarat looked at the newspaper and saw the picture above. She is the #1 beauty in the world. The newspaper was gently put down, her crimson hair tucked together, and she said with a smile, after the last setback, she has changed her face and practiced hard. Now her strength has definitely become much stronger. She is no longer the arrogant woman she used to be, and just entered the New World, she defeated the giant tiger, Iron Green. This is the real big pirate with a bounty of up to 230 million Bailey. Chiwu Hai Boya Yi Han Cook, she really deserves this title now, the queen's sweetheart sneered, a mocking look on her pretty face, and she said directly, who said that this man has no strength? Obviously not strong enough to dare to covet her beauty, and want to have this woman, she is an idiot. This kind of man, it is best to be killed as soon as possible. Betty took a breath and said calmly as always, it can't be said that he is too weak, it should be Boya. Hancock has a domineering queen, and also has a strong heart, where can she go in the future? One step is unimaginable. Carmen shrugged Ling Xiang's shoulders, with a look of admiration on her pretty face, and said with a smile, she has become a role model for many women, and everyone admires her. Joining her team is a kind of honor, and there will definitely be more and more people who will go to her and strengthen her strength. Nuauchi nodded high, Ying smiled, and praised, seriously, being a woman, to be able to reach her level, there is no regret in life. The US gang smiled and said, yes, even after a few decades, her name will still be circulated in the sea, this is inevitable. After all, women themselves are disadvantaged groups. Innate conditions are not destined to be too strong. She can be obedient to her own efforts and make great achievements. It is really worthy of all women to learn. With fair hair, he wrapped his arms around him, smiled gracefully and said, yes, I am right as well. If I meet her, I will definitely choose to join and fight with her. Not for anything else, but also a woman, you must give her a support, it is really not easy. Nami looked at them, blinked her big eyes, and laughed. I'm itchy because of what you guys said, I really want to witness her peerless beauty right now. At this moment, an alarm sounded from outside the door. The square is the town of Rog, we are going to enter the Great Waterway. The voice in front was much louder than usual, and the tone was very excited. It spread all over the place. When I heard the alarm sound from outside, the girls hurriedly stopped, and all the faces showed excitement. Full face. Karina's beautiful eyes were shining, and she said very happily, here we are, after so many days of sailing, we are finally going to enter the Great Waterway, he. Happy, so happy, ha 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 ha. Corona danced in the air and let out a silver bell laughter. Makino smiled slightly, still so gentle and generous, everyone is very happy, so am I really want to set foot in that mysterious sea. Carmen nodded, smiled sweetly and said, we're still doing well, the outside must be very excited now. Nami held up her little head, her pretty face showed a firm look, and said in a firm tone, next, we will monitor the weather well, and we must conquer this dangerous sea. You absolutely can, no problem. Nuauchi patted her on the shoulder, smiled and encouraged her. At this time, Chris stopped practicing and said calmly, go to Rogue Town and finish talking, then walk directly to the door. The girls froze for a moment, looked at each other, and couldn't believe it. After all, Chris is a cultivator, so why would he want to waste time? But they think about it and understand what's going on. Yeah, this is the last place. Alrita shrugged her shoulders and said casually, Chris must take it seriously, just treat it as leaving a beautiful queen of sweethearts. Brushing her hair and smiling sweetly, Rog Town is the hometown of One Piece, Chris is sure I want to go shopping. After all, we are the sea, if we don't go to Rogue Town. It doesn't always feel perfect. Betty exhaled the smoke from her mouth and said lightly, okay, let's go out, I would like to see what is different about this town where it begins and ends. Go. On deck. I saw it, that is Rog Town, haha, the hometown of One Piece 750, I am here. Hurry, drive faster, and rush directly into the Great Channel. Your sister, it's rare to come to Rog Town, so you must go up and get some wool. Stop talking, come, jump up, and twist it all for Lao Su. Hearing the cheers and shouts of the crew below, Bashas couldn't help but roared and finally came to the last stop, way ha 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 ha. Poison cocked his chair and said with a strange smile, since we are about to enter the Great Waterway, why not make a scene to pick up everyone in Suge Town, and poison them to death, hee. Ajin waved his fists and tried to cultivate domineering. Said indifferently, after landing on the island, be sure to wander around and pay tribute to the hometown of Yile One Piece Roger. Luo looked at Hawkins, still so aloof, we'll go to the execution stand together later to see Roger's burial place. Roger, who opened the era of great wealth, his hometown is indeed worth visiting. Hawkins nodded and responded in a low tone. Crow habitually pushed his glasses, and said calmly and rationally, Rog Town is too famous, and Xiaoding has a lot of people who come here. There's no shortage of strong newcomers here, and if I'm guessing right, we'll definitely have new members on board when we leave Rogue. Lafayette turned his cane, smiled slightly, and said politely, you analyzed it very well, I don't think your guess will go wrong. In the Four Seas, all pirates who want to enter the Great Waterway, if they have the conditions, will come here to chat, and then rush into the Great Front Road. Therefore, there must be a lot of newcomers in this place. 116. You foolish woman, Dusky. The naval base, inside an office. There are two people here, a man and a woman, it is Colonel Smog, and Colonel Dasky. Recently, there are more and more pirates in the East China Sea. Dasky is wearing a pair of brown glasses. He looked at the information, and said something with emotion on his beautiful and refined face. All of this was done because of that bastard Chris, who really wanted to catch him. If he hadn't taken the lead, how would those good people go out to sea and rush to the great waterway? After all, the first reward of 100 million Bailey is really shocking. This is in the world, but it has never happened before. Dasky turned to look at Sig, and she blinked her beautiful eyes with a puzzled look on her face, and asked Tilda, Mr. Colonel, you said that Chris has not yet entered the Great Aviation Pass, why is the reward so high? Until now, I still haven't figured it out. Do you know why the headquarters do this? Colonel Smoker is an old smoker, leaning on the chair with a cigar in his mouth, and said impatiently, I've told you how many times, don't say it every time. A lot. You said so much, how can I answer, can you have a brain, ha? Dasky is a natural idiot, very pure and kind, put his hands together, sincerely apologize, and say something sorry, Colonel, I will pay attention to it in the future, Colonel, can you please let me ask a few questions, answer it. Why does Chris put the bounty so high? Is there any purpose for this department to do this? Dusky's eyes were firm, and she said in a serious tone, no matter what, Chris must be caught, and he cannot be allowed to continue. Although he has a high bounty, he is definitely not your opponent, Colonel Sama. I'm not wrong. Colonel Sugar spit out the smoke from his mouth, glared at Dasky, and said very dissatisfiedly, you the woman is really helpless. How can I have a subordinate like you who suffers from the disease? When I meet you, I have really lost 8 lives. As a scumbag like you, you can be a sergeant at most, don't think about it any further, it's really a complete picture. Smoker leaned back in the chair, put his feet on the desk, took a breath, how could a young man like Chris be my opponent? Can you be a little brainy, do I need to say more? Dasky nodded again and said respectfully, yes, I was wrong, I'm sorry. Colonel Smog ignored her and said to herself. As for why he offered a reward of 100 million bells, it was mainly the potential is too great, and there is another reason for the opportunity to become a strong man. Recently, the sea has become more and more chaotic, and it is time to shock the 4 seas. Offer Chris a higher reward, let him have enough fame, and then arrest him, so we can see who dares to go out to sea. This is called setting a benchmark, killing chickens and monkeys, it can promote the reputation of the Navy, and it is more conducive to circumvent this sea. Shush took a breath, glanced at Dusky, and said impatiently, a few days ago don't you hear the call from the headquarters? Lieutenant General Ghost Spider, who has already left Marin Vando, is on his way to the East China Sea. This guy is very powerful. He is a veteran lieutenant general. Dusky's beautiful eyes lit up, and she reacted instantly. On her beautiful and fair eyelids, she suddenly realized that she said something quickly. Oh yeah, how did I forget about this? Since the headquarters has dispatched a lieutenant general, then Chris will definitely be finished this time, and there will be no chance. If it's time, Lieutenant General Ghost Spider should go to the East China Sea, isn't it, Colonel? Smoker spit out the smoke in his mouth and said directly, aren't you talking nonsense, don't you know how fast the warship is? That bastard has arrived in the East China Sea. Maybe Chris has already been caught by him. I don't want to mention that bastard. Don't tell me about this guy. After listening to it, Dasky nodded, and she blinked her beautiful eyes. With a pure and sweet smile, that's right, Lord Colonel is attracted to doves, and he definitely doesn't like them hawks. Bai Wan, our philosophy is completely different from theirs, not as brutal as they are, so serious, Colonel, I am very curious about Chris. Dasky is holding the famous sword Shiu, wrinkled and good-looking. His eyebrows were raised, and he analyzed, judging from various sources of information, this Chris' strength must be very powerful. Whether he has a devil fruit, whether he will be domineering, these are unknown. If you think about it, this person is really mysterious. I'm afraid that the means of escaping are also very powerful. He is definitely not the opponent of Lieutenant General Ghost Spider, but if he keeps running away, then Lieutenant General Ghost Spider may not be able to catch it. He, isn't it, Colonel Sama? Sig glared at her, with an angry look on his face, and cursed fiercely. You idiot, I told you all, don't tell me about this guy, you don't understand human language, want me to tell you a few luck. Whether he can catch Chris, what does it have to do with Lao Su? Don't mention this bastard to me again, do you hear me? You stupid woman. Knock knock knock. Dusky was about to apologize when there was a slamming sound from outside the door. Don't mention him again, idiot. Sig scolded her, took a breath of cigarette, and said directly, come in. Dusky nodded repeatedly, holding Shiu and standing aside. Bai Ruyu was covered with apology, and looked very embarrassed. With a creak, the wooden door slowly opened, and a young man in a navy uniform walked in. The colonel, to report a situation to you. News came from the people below that Cavendish, who had a bounty of 92 million Baileys, appeared in the town. Because he is so handsome, he has caused a great sensation. Girls from many years ago are all rushing to go to Colonel Guguan. How should we be an example now? Shall we dispatch the navy to arrest him? Before Smog spoke, Dusky hurriedly spoke up. May's eyes widened, her pretty face was full of shock, and she said incredulously, 92 million Baileys. In the East China Sea, in addition to Chris, there are pirates with such a high reward. How is this possible? Did you make a mistake? There is no way that such a high bounty would be offered. Right after that, he hurriedly turned his head to look at Si Yuanj, and quickly asked, Lord Shengling, I'm not mistaken, we don't have such a high bounty in the East China Sea. Do it. I remember very clearly that in the East China Sea, the sea robber with the highest bounty is the leader of the Evil Dragon pirates, the Evil Dragon with a bounty of 20 million Bailey. As for this criminal with a bounty of 9 and 2 million Baileys, it doesn't exist at all. Colonel Smog took a breath, and in front of the young man, he directly reprimanded and said something. You idiot, can't you grow your brains? Why does Cavendish have to be from the East China Sea? Can't he come from other sea areas? Dusky, use your brain, don't keep thinking like this. Have to pay attention to this woman again, stand up directly, and said with a sneer, Shao thought that if the bounty was more than 90,000 yuan, he would be able to go wild on my territory. Just a mere highway, see how Lao Su arrests him. After the arrangement, all the pirates who entered the town, don't let Smog go outside, and said coldly, as for Cavendish, I will arrest it myself, never try to escape from me. The young man hurriedly gave a military salute and said respectfully, Yes, Colonel, I'll make arrangements now. Colonel, wait for me, Dasichi, holding Shinan, and hurriedly followed, with a firm look on her pretty face, no matter what, we must catch this big pirate. All the sea photos, we have to arrest them one by one and bring them to justice. We must not tolerate them. Then, the three of them walked out of the room and began to gather the navy, preparing to conduct a cleanup against all the pirates in the town. 117. Cavendish, let Lao Su stay in the advanced city. Rogue Town, above a small square. At this time, in the center of the square, there was a man and many young girls. As for the outside of the square, there were many men, all looking towards the center of the square. All of them were full of jealousy and jealousy. What's the matter? How come I don't have this kind of treatment? Are these women with grass and mud horses blind? I'm so handsome, can't they all see it? I actually like this little white face. They are all women with eyes and no pearls. Brother is more handsome than you, and you are a little worse than me. They all look down on me, let alone you. I heard that this person is called Cavendish. Where did this Nima come from? I have never heard of this person in Rogue Town, grass. Whoever he is, I curse him for not having little Tintin anyway. Plaza Center. Cavendish was wearing the western sword Durandal, his right hand was raised high, pointed diagonally to the sky, and he said with awe, Beautiful girls, please tell this young master. Who is the most handsome person you have ever met? You must tell the truth. Hearing his words, all the girls can't take it lightly. One by one, without saying a word, they hurriedly shouted, very excited. It's you, Lord Cavendish. Lord Cavendish, please let me marry you. I will definitely listen to you. Everything depends on you. I love you. Lord Cavendish, I love you the most. Don't listen to them. I'm the one who likes you the most. I can cook a lot of delicious food, and I'm very good at taking care of people. Please let me be your woman, my lord. So excited. Lord Cavendish is so handsome. I'm going to faint. Lord Cavendish, please let me hug. Okay, please. Humming and listening to the praises of the girls, feeling the enthusiastic atmosphere, Cavendish was really happy. He kept changing his standing position, touching his chin, waving his big hand, and holding a sword for a while. Really? This young master is indeed the most handsome and the most gifted. No matter where you go, it will become the focus of the audience. No one can resist the charm of this young master. Why is this young master so popular? It's really annoying. Faced with the praise of the girls, Cavendish's old problem committed, fell into narcissism, unable to extricate himself, there was talking to himself. At this moment, a cold voice came from a distance. You will become the center of attention later. Cavendish Smorg, who has a reward of 9,000 and 10,000, drank a cigar, and his back is like a sea tower. You are brave. Exactly, I'm bored today, so I'll have a good time with you. Don't be too weak, Cavendish. Dusky followed behind Smog, hugged Shiu, blinked her beautiful eyes, and asked curiously, is he Cavendish? He looks white and clean, not good looking at all. He doesn't look like a man, like a woman. A man's skin can be so fair. At first glance, he feels very sissy, and he doesn't have the viciousness of a pirate at all. Colonel, are we going to recognize the wrong person? He shouldn't be Highway. The soldiers at the side of the bar, with Dusky, quickly said respectfully, Sergeant Dusky, we will not be mistaken, it is indeed Kevin Welcome's shoe. You see, this is his reward order, and the reward is written on it. Dusky glanced at the photo on the reward order, with a look of surprise on her beautiful and delicate face, and said something incredulous. Really, he is really a pirate. It's so different, I thought he was a noble boy, it's unbelievable. This is the first time I've seen such a pirate. I can't believe it. The young girls, including the men outside, exclaimed and walked away. The colonel is here. The young girls, no longer caring about praising Cavendish, hurriedly walked out of the square one by one as if they had encountered some great horror. After all, Smog is a famous murderer in Rogtown. He is very ruthless. He does not accept the orders of his superiors. He acts recklessly in Rogtown and rules this place with iron and blood. All of them are very afraid of him, like a tiger. As long as they see him, the two Beakad will definitely turn their heads and leave without saying a word, hiding far away. Come back, you all come back to this young master. When Cavendish saw that the girls had all left, he was very angry, and hurriedly shouted and said something. This young master is here, what are you afraid of? Come over to this young master, have you heard? This young master is the focus of the audience, and he must not be taken away by others, absolutely not allowed. There's no way, who told me that this young master looks so handsome, alas. This time, the women didn't listen to him, they walked forward without any hesitation, and they quickly ran to the distance. Smog took a breath, sneered, put his hands on both sides, clasped tightly, and said sarcastically, that's right, it's not bad, you really treat yourself as a character, thinking that if you offer a reward of more than 90 million, you can patrol leaving here, speaking of which, you are eligible to enter the advanced city with a bounty. Smog dipped a cigar, glanced up and down at Cavendish, and said disdainfully, you are very handsome, and you enter the advanced city with such a beautiful scenery. Actually not bad. Dasky stood behind CJ, holding the famous sword Shiu. Chaojian showed a serious look, and said the colonel, he is a pirate with a bounty of more than 90 million. You must be careful, you must not to the effect. I think that Hazang, who can offer a reward of this amount, must be very strong. There are many trump cards like Chris. He must have a lot of trump cards, and it is not so easy to deal with. In short, Colonel, you must be vigilant, and you must not despise any pirate shogun who turned his back on Dusky, and said impatiently, you step aside, don't be here, Rory. Yes, did not hear. Can't you be quiet, you stupid woman, talking so much every day. Okay, you all step back and don't get in the way here. The soldiers below hurriedly said respectfully, Foot. Colonel Smog Dasky nodded again and again. His pretty face was full of apology, and he said embarrassedly, Okay, Colonel, I'll just step aside. You must be careful, don't be careless. Then, a bunch of people walked behind, away from the battlefield. Hearing what Dusky said just now, Cavendish was very angry and said cursingly, It's that damn Chris again. I don't want to hear him last. Although he dared to offer a reward of 100 million Bailey, he actually dared to offer a reward much more than the young master Ben. I was really mad at the young master. I rushed to the East China Sea specifically to defeat him, to see if he dared to steal the limelight of the young master Cavendish. Shu Gao raised his right hand and said incomparably narcissistic, This young master is the focus of the entire ocean, and no one's name can surpass this young master. After I leave here, I will go to Chris. After defeating him, everyone will know how powerful this young master is. Is he really the most handsome? Yes, this young master is. Cavendish kept walking around, talking to himself there, as if Zhou Guo was his fan, and the whole stage belonged to him. Completely in narcissism, can't wake up at all. 118. Die for this young master, beautiful sword, blue bird. Dusky stood far away, listening to Cavendish muttering to himself. Chao Xian couldn't help but look surprised and said something. What's the matter with him? It's rare that he has a problem with his head. It should be, he has a bounty of more than 90 million, it can't be a fool. Dusky turned to look at the navy, and asked curiously, Do you know what happened to him? Who knows can tell me, I am very want to know. A young navy, with a big smile and a very respectful tone, answered Sergeant Dasky, This Cavendish has always been a narcissistic pirate. He always regards himself as the focus of the audience, hoping to gain others. If someone stole the show with the applause and flowers, he would be very angry. As he said just now, he was stole the limelight by Chris, so he appeared in the East China Sea. That's the way it is, Sergeant Dusky. Dusky nodded. Mei Mei looked at Cavendish, and Bai Shi put on it delicately, full of surprise, and murmured that in this world, there is such a narcissistic guy. It's incredible. But it's strange that he likes to be in the limelight so much that he can live to this day. It seems that his strength must be very strong, so there has been no accident. Dasichi is holding the famous sword Shiu, and said firmly, However, he is definitely finished this time, and there is no chance to escape again. Because he is facing, but the colonel. At this time, Smog took a breath, slowly pulled out the 10 hands of Hai Lu Shi from behind, and said with a sneer, It turns out that you are here because of Chris. So coincidentally, it won't be long before Chris will be caught in the Push City. At that time, you can be in there and be his company. Hearing Smog's words, Cavendish came back to his senses and asked curiously, What's the matter? Chris was arrested. That's not good. I haven't defeated him yet. How can I let him die so easily? Old smoker, who has taken Chris, just tell this young master, then I will let you go. The word just fell. A hissing sound came from a distance. A white gust of wind, galloping fast, came towards the center of the square, and Cavendish waved his hand and said with a loud laugh, Falulu, where did you go just now? This young master thought you lost it. Dusky's beautiful eyes lit up, with a look of surprise on her pretty face. She said incredulously, He even has a mount, and he is a very strong white horse. The situation of the horse on the right must be full of spirituality and can be understood and understood. Dasky reacted, looking at the soldiers below, and asked, That Faruru is also on the reward order. Since Cavendish has been rewarded, then his beloved horse, it makes no sense. Offer a bounty. A certain naval soldier, with a humble tone, quickly responded to Sergeant Dasky, the beloved horse of the pirate Cavendish, and a bounty of 500,000 Baileys was also offered. Dasichi hugged Shiyu. Zheng nodded seriously, and said seriously, Since he has also been offered a bounty, then he must be caught. As long as it is passed through the group, then the inevitable problems cannot be let go, and all of them will be caught in the advanced city. Only when we go to the deep-sea prison can we make them feel sorry and wash away their sins. Smaug holds 10 hands in his right hand, takes a breath of cigarette, and sneers. Very well, since the mount is also here, then let it go. Leaving no seeds. At this time, Farulu had already run to Cavendish and let out a long, cheerful cry, hiss tilde tilde. Cavendish patted the pure white BMW and said with a big laugh, "Why are you so happy? Do you miss this young master?" Farulu rubbed Cavendish's body, nodded his horse's head, full of spirituality. Very smart. Cavendish stroked Farulu's mane, smiled and said, "Okay, you first stay aside, this young master has to get rid of all these navy. They are so arrogant, they dare to look down on this young master, Let them know that this young master is amazing." Farulu nodded his horse's head, let out a clear cry, and hurriedly ran to the side, watching the battle from a distance. Cavendish turned his head to the right to Smaug, pointed at him and said sternly, "Big Smoker, let me ask you one last question, has Chris been caught? If you don't answer again, this young master will not spare you lightly." Smaug spit out the gas in his mouth, his eyes became cold, and he said viciously, "Little devil, don't be so self-righteous. If you want the answer, go to the advanced city to find it." As soon as his footsteps kicked on the ground, with a swish sound, he raised 10 hands with his right hand, made a surprise appearance, and rushed towards Cavendish quickly. Like a tiger descending the mountain, roaring in the forest, its awe-inspiring momentum. "Damn it, start fighting if you don't agree." Cavendish got angry, pulled out Durandal, kicked the ground likewise, pointed the tip of his sword to 10 hands, and stabbed away. Beautiful sword, blue bird. With a swipe, the sword attacked too fast, causing the air in the Joe Kingdom to vibrate, forming a powerful air current, the sword chi rippling, criss-crossed, and aggressively attacked Smaug. I saw Cavendish. With such a fierce attack, Dasiki's eyes lit up, and the beautiful and delicate danger was covered with shocking colors. I thought his sword was just a decoration. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be a master swordsman. It is really too powerful. Dasky shook his head, with a determined look, and said with great certainty, "Such a powerful swordsman, the lethality is too great to let him escape. He must be caught and pushed into the city and kept there for the rest of his life." At this moment, Smaug squinted slightly, not paying attention to the sword energy in front of him. He took a cigar and said coldly, "Little devil, your swordsmanship is good, but unfortunately you met me." As soon as the words were finished, the strong airflow rolled up by the sword chi slammed into his body with a loud explosion. Allied. The smoke is thick and white as snow. Under the sunlight, there is a faint white light. I am so beautiful when I wake up, what is going on? Seeing such a strange scene, Cavendish was stunned, his face full of horror, and he didn't understand what happened. Really shocked. You'll know the answer later. A cold voice came, and with a swoosh, Smoker's body was emitting white smoke, holding 10 hands, and quickly approached Cavendish. With 10 hands, Hai Lu Shi, carrying a violent aura, stabbed him fiercely and saw Smaug suddenly appear. Cavendish was startled and panicked, and it was too late to escape. Joust, without saying a word, he quickly lifted Durandal up, blocked in front of him for a short handover, and a clear explosion came, and there were faint sparks at the collision place, and the air seemed to vibrate. Cavendish felt a strong force, screamed, and flew backwards. He wanted to stabilize his body, but Smaug was a man with strange strength, which made Cavendish unable to control the bang. With a bang, Cavendish slammed to the ground, castrated unabated, and continued to roll back for several laps before finally stopping. At this time, his hair is messy, his hat is crooked, and his white clothes are stained with a lot of dust. The image of the pirate nobleman has long since disappeared, and he looks extremely desolate. It is completely different from the previous Cavendish. Man, it's really too big. 119. The only person who knows killing, Rommel's Itachi. As soon as Faruru saw Cavendish's appearance, without saying a word, he rushed to his side and said that it was very spiritual. Since he followed Cavendish, it was the first time he saw him in such a downfall. Before that, its owner has always been very cool and indifferent, and it really scared Farulu. What a spiritual BMW. Dusky looked at Farulu with a firm look in her beautiful eyes, and said seriously, such a potential horse must be caught and must not be let go. The master is a sinful existence, so the mount must also be affected. It is not a good thing, and must be brought to justice. At this moment, Smoker took a breath, strode towards Cavendish, and said with a sneer, "It seems that your strength is not that weak. It's really good to be able to withstand my 10-handed assault, but, next, can you stop it?" Cavendish staggered to his feet, glanced at his clothes, and an angry expression instantly appeared on his face. At Smog, shouted, roared, "Bastard! How dare you let this young master get his clothes dirty, damn it! If I don't kill you, this young master will never be reconciled." Beautiful sword Swan Lake. With a bang, the man jumped high, and quickly came to Smog's head. He stood upside down, and Durandal turned 483 at a high speed. The sword light was constantly flashing with cold light, and the space seemed to be cut open like a gust of wind. Up, a sharp slash, fierce and unusual, towards Smog below, slashing down fiercely. This is Cavendish, a blow with anger. Destined to kill Smoker and chop him to pieces. Evil things. Smog looked up and looked up, ignoring all the swords and shadows, and didn't care about Cavendish's slash at all, and said coldly, "No matter how strong your swordsmanship is, what can you do to me? You are really ignorant, Cavendish." Cavendish has lost his mind, his eyes are full of anger, and he shouted loudly, "Go to hell, brush brush." The sword Durandal kept slashing, and the rotation was very fast. At least a dozen knives were slashed every second, and the air kept vibrating, forming a sword wind. Bang bang tilde Smog's body was constantly chopped and chopped, turning into a burst of white smoke, floating in the air, shrouding him in it. Damn, why is this happening again? What's going on? Cavendish was completely mad, he really wanted to know the answer, it was extremely painful. No matter what, the chop BCB is right, swishing, constantly swinging the sword, and cutting Smoker's body into a large piece of white smoke. Smog's head was split in half and turned into white smoke. He stared at Cavendish coldly. He didn't bother to say a word. Go to the advanced city and go to the guide to find the answer. The right hand clenched 10 hands, and before Cavendish could react, he swept out with astonishing power, as fast as lightning, and directly reported a bang on Cavendish's back, followed by a scream. What? Cavendish was beaten until he spat out a mouthful of blood, flew forward, fell straight to the ground, and rolled back several times. The smoke rose high, covering him, hissing that he couldn't see what was inside. Seeing the master in such a tragic state, Farulu got angry and roared, like an arrow from the string, galloping towards Shog. The speed is astonishing, the force is extremely fierce, and it is wrapped in a gust of wind, only a faint white figure can be seen, and it is as fast as a phoenix. A mere beast dares to roar at me. Smog took a cigar in his mouth and took a sip of his cigarette, his eyes narrowed and he uttered 2 words coldly. His arm turned into white smoke and quickly transformed into the shape of a snake. Like a big python, quickly swam towards Farulu. The boa constrictor is really too huge. When it swims, the air vibrates, forming a monster like this big snake. It walks in the wind and rides the clouds. It looks amazing. The purchase was too huge, and Farulu couldn't dodge at all. He was directly hit with a hiss, spit out a mouthful of blood, flew out backwards, swung it to the ground, and couldn't get up again like a dead dog. The faint whimper there is too miserable to look directly at. At this time, the smoke dissipated, revealing the appearance of Cavendish. I saw him with his back to the sky, lying there quietly, motionless, as if he had died in the square, and suddenly fell into silence. 1 person and 1 horse, all were defeated. Is this meant to play dead, Cavendish? Smog took a cigar, strode towards him, and said with a sneer, my attack will at most hit you hard, but you won't be able to get up. In front of me, you are not qualified to pretend to be dead yet. If you want to get away with it, you are being bullied by me." Before the words were finished, with a bang, the Cavendish on the ground disappeared instantly. Before Smog could react, there was a bang, and his body was directly cut in half. White smoke. Cavendish turned his back to Smog, completely changed. His eyes were ruthless, and the strange voice with a very incomparable smile sounded so refreshing. "Damn Cavendish, you've become so weak as a dog, and you have to come forward. Now, you know how powerful this uncle is. In the future, hand over your body to me, rest and then take it back. Gia Gia Gia, I will use your body to kill everyone, whether it is humans or animals, all of them will be killed. To die, kill, kill, kill this world, it must be destroyed, to the end." Gia 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 saw such a terrifying scene. Dasichi was taken aback. Ming screamed, the famous sword Shiu in his arms almost fell to the ground. May's eyes widened, her pretty face was full of shock. She said incredulously, how could he be like this? So gloomy, so terrifying, nothing like the person just now. What the hell is going on? Why did it suddenly become so much stronger? Dasky was shocked. A series of questions kept asking the soldiers below. They were also taken aback and hurriedly explained Colonel Dasky. It was mentioned in the reward order. He also had another name. 1. Rommel's Scythe. This is his personality, and the killing intent is very strong, and he only knows how to kill, but he has no thinking at all. According to what was mentioned in the bounty order, if he becomes this state of personality, his strength will be stronger than normal, but no matter how strong he becomes, he will definitely not be a match for the colonel. After all, the colonel is a natural ability person, he can't attack the colonel at all. 120. Participate in the Pirates' biggest festival, the Expo. Lee personality. Dusky's beautiful eyes looked at the strange man in front of her. With a look of surprise on her pretty face, she couldn't believe that she had two personalities. It was really incredible. But it's still better than the previous one. Now this one is completely crazy. It looks really scary and a man is too dangerous. We must catch him and lock him into the city. At this time, Smog's body returned to its original state, drank a cigar, took a puff of cigarette and said, no wonder there will be a reward of more than 10,000 Baileys, so it is. As far as the speed of your sword attack just now, the amount of the reward is indeed a little less. If you are allowed to escape from here, it will not be a problem to break the reward of 200 million in the future. Too bad you don't have this chance. As soon as the voice fell, white smoke instantly rose from both hands and feet, very thick, and gave CGE's body to bow Guo tilde get up. Hearing Smog's voice, Cavendish was stunned for a moment, then turned around quickly, with a look of shock on his cold and crazy eyelids, and said something. Why are you not dead? Impossible, I clearly cut your body and cut you in half, why is this happening? Cavendish's eyes turned cold, and he cursed more and more madly, saying, damn Cavendish, Wanran has caused such a big trouble for Lao Su. I really want to kill you, bastard Cavendish. Smog spit out the smoke from his mouth, and said with dissatisfaction, I don't like your appearance very much. I've decided, I don't want to continue playing with you, or just take you down and talk to a lunatic, it's totally unnecessary. As soon as the voice fell, his body turned into a puff of white smoke, fast like lightning, and rushed towards Cavendish. At this time, Sig's hands and feet had turned into white smoke, and they were separated and all directed towards Ruo Kawan. Dish attack. This is the white school you asked for. Cavendish was taken aback by Smog's speed. It was too fast to dodge. Holding Durandal, he was full of killing intent. He smiled cruelly and said, damn, I don't believe I can't kill you. Brush drama brush. Cavendish was angry, swords and lights, swords and shadows, attacked quickly, and kept slashing at the white smoke. The sound of bang, bang, kept ringing, and Smog's body was cut into countless pieces by Cavendish. The white smoke spread out around. Kill kill kill. I want to kill you completely, ha ha ha. Cavendish is in a frenzy, doesn't care, it's just a slash to Rothhog's body, are you daydreaming? Suddenly, a white head appeared behind Cavendish's head, and slammed into his head with such a high speed and great momentum that if he was hit, it would definitely be uncomfortable. What? Hearing this sound coming from behind, Cavendish was shocked. He just wanted to dodge with a bang. Followed by a scream, Cavendish was knocked out and fell to the ground. He fainted completely and couldn't get up again. At this moment, Smog put his 10 hands behind his back, looked coldly at the dead dog on the ground, and said with disdain, "The qualifications are really good, but unfortunately they won't be domineering. I also want to challenge me. As long as I am guarding Rogue Town, no matter which pirate, I will leave here alive and resting." Dasky walked over quickly, with a smile on her beautiful and delicate face, and said respectfully, "Colonel, you really are the best. I knew it would be so. This guy is really too dangerous. I'm definitely not his opponent. It's enough to rely on the Colonel." Dasky looked at Cavendish on the ground, hugged Shiyu and said, "His sword just now, the speed is really amazing, and it is full of lethality. Dangerous, if this person is not locked in the advanced city, it is really too dangerous." At this moment, a young navy walked over quickly. He bowed to Smog, said in a respectful tone, and said quickly, "Lord Colonel, the news came from the branch just now that the traces of the Chris pirates were found. The group of them has already gone to the town of Luoge, and they are walking to the execution platform, the Colonel. Are we going to rush there and arrest them all?" Everyone was stunned when he heard his words. Some can't react. Just knocked down a bounty of nearly 100 million, and now there is another one. And this one is genuine, with a bounty of 100 million sea loot. Dusky was almost surprised, and said quickly, "Is the news accurate? Isn't it just a rumor? Could it be that Lieutenant General Ghost Spider didn't catch Chris? That's impossible, right? Besides, even if he hadn't been caught, how could he still dare to appear in Rogue Town?" He quickly turned his head to look at Shug, and asked in doubt, "Lord Colonel, I'm right, Chris couldn't have appeared in town." Smog glared at her, took a breath, and scolded her directly. "Get up, you talk the most. If you look at the right, you'll know. Evil, among my subordinates, you are the only one who sees goods. Come on, take this guy and that wild horse with you." After completing the exchange, he strode forward, preparing to catch and stab the Chris pirates. Dasky hurriedly followed, with a look of guilt all over her face, and said embarrassedly, "Sir Colonel, I'm sorry, I'm going down. We'll notice. Ask for flowers. But it would be really nice if Chris was here. This pirate with the highest reward in the East China Sea. If we catch him, then we can definitely shock the pirates to see who dares to go out to sea. That's right, you have to do this, and catch all the pirates that appear in the town one by one." Then, without any hesitation, the group rushed towards the execution platform and rushed to the town. On a certain street, there are many women, all of them are bright and beautiful, all of them are very beautiful. This is Rogue Town, it is indeed very prosperous. Empress Sweetheart looked left and right, her beautiful eyes were shining, she smiled and said, "As expected, the hometown of King Hazo is really different." Dee took a puff of cigarette and remained calm as always. People come and go in an endless stream. It's really lively. Karina hit the furthest around, with a sly look in her eyes, and said to Nami next to her, "It's been a long time. I stole something, and my hands are itchy. Nami, should we shop around and see if we can get something good?" Nami gave her a white look, snorted, and said angrily, "I've already washed my hands with gold, and I won't do this in the future. Anyway, we have no shortage of gold and silver jewelry on board, so why go the old way? Now what I want to do, it is to find treasures and find more treasures, and this is super." Nami patted Karina on the shoulder, laughed loudly, and said very frankly that as for stealing, it is in the past tense. I am not the little thief cat I used to be. Ha ha ha. Nuauchi nodded high, looked at the two of them, smiled sweetly and said, "That's right, don't keep doing these new worlds. There is a big treasure waiting for us. The treasure inside must be very rich. That is the biggest pirate rocks. The treasure left behind, it's exciting to think about it." Makino looked at Keiya and said with a gentle smile, In the East China Sea, this is the first time I have seen such a prosperous town. Kia nodded her head and smiled sweetly. According to Chris, the real prosperous place is in the New World where the biggest celebration of pirates will be held. Getting used to the color, he murmured, I really want to enter the New World early and feel the winter flowers there. I believe that it must be very fun there, and it is the place everyone yearns for.